Listen to the sound beneath all sounds. It begins not with music, nor with words, but with the faint rustle of breath, the whisper of your own life moving gently through you. You are here, sitting, breathing, existing among all that moves and all that rests. This is where silence begins. In the old mountain temples of the East, there were mornings so still that even the wind forgot to move. Bamboo stood motionless. The dew clung to its leaves like quiet jewels, and the monks walked barefoot across the stone courtyard, their robes brushing against the dawn. They moved without hurry, without noise. They moved as if each step were a question to the earth, and each breath was an answer. When you sit in this same awareness, the years between you and them dissolve. There's only this moment, timeless, open, untouched. The teaching of Zen begins here, to be awake in stillness, to let awareness flow without resistance. You may have heard that mindfulness is attention, a practice of being present. But in Zen, mindfulness is more than attention. It is the dissolution of the one who attends. When awareness flows freely, it belongs to no one. You are no longer the watcher of your breath, but the breath itself, moving in and out, born and dying with each moment. Sit. Let your back straighten gently, not with force, but like a reed growing toward light. Let your hands rest upon your lap. Inhale softly through the nose, as if drawing in the scent of old cedar and rain. Exhale slowly through the mouth, as if releasing 1,000 forgotten thoughts. There is nothing to fix, nothing to improve, nothing to reach for. You're already home. The river does not push itself downstream. It flows because gravity calls it. Awareness, too, flows when you stop holding it. This is silent mindfulness, not the silence of absence, but the silence of harmony. You listen, and life breathes through you. A master once said, "When you seek stillness, you disturb it. When you let go, stillness finds you." And so this journey begins. 20 quiet tales of awakening, compassion, and the gentle art of letting go. Each story is a small doorway into the vastness within you. You will meet monks and travelers, children and sages, lovers and wanderers, each discovering that the mind, once still, becomes like a clear pond reflecting everything yet clinging to nothing. Do not rush through these stories. Let them breathe. Between each word, there is space. Between each sentence, a small pause where realization can land softly, like a feather. You are not reading to learn. You are reading to remember. You are remembering the peace that was never lost, only buried under noise. The first story you will hear will speak of the body, this fragile, holy vessel that anchors awareness in the physical world. Zen calls it shin-shin, body-mind, inseparable. To be mindful of the body is to see that it is not yours, but nature borrowing form through you. You will feel the stillness of breath, the pulse beneath skin, and understand. Even silence has rhythm. Later stories will carry you deeper, into letting go of control, into compassion, into the dance of impermanence, and finally into the art of returning again and again to the simple act of being. Each moral will be quiet, no commandments, no judgment, only a reflection as gentle as moonlight on water. The monks of the old temples used to say, when water is clear, you see the moon. When a mind is clear, you see yourself. That is the essence of this path. Not to change who you are, but to see clearly what has always been. Imagine now that you are walking through the gates of a mountain temple. The wood is old and fragrant with incense. A small bell rings in the distance. You hear sandals brushing over gravel, a faint stream murmuring beyond the wall. You bow slightly, not to anyone but to the space itself. The air carries the scent of pine and morning rain. A monk passes by and smiles, a smile that says nothing and everything. He gestures for you to follow him to the meditation hall. Inside, the floor is smooth and cool. Candles flicker against the faint outline of Buddha statues, their faces serene, half-lit in gold. You kneel, and in that kneeling, the world becomes smaller and larger at once. You begin to notice the heartbeat in your chest, the weight of your body, the warmth in your palms. You notice how thoughts come and go, like travelers passing through a village at dusk. No need to greet them. No need to chase them. You simply let them pass. This is Zazen, sitting without goal, sitting as existence itself. The mountain does not try to meditate, yet it is perfectly still. The sky does not hold thoughts, yet clouds move freely across it. You too can be that vast, silent, spacious. Breathe again. Feel the air enter and leave. Do not name it. Do not measure it. Just feel. Somewhere outside, a bamboo leaf falls. It lands without sound, yet the entire forest hears it. That is the way of awareness, soft, total, indivisible. In this silence, you may notice something unusual, not an emptiness, but a fullness. The fullness of being alive without needing to do anything. This is where mindfulness matures, when it no longer feels like a practice, but a remembering. Stillness is not the absence of motion. It is the absence of resistance. The wind can blow, waves can rise, and yet the lake remains itself. Awareness flows not because it is forced, but because it is free. When you understand this, you stop fighting your own nature. You stop demanding that the moment be different. You begin to see that everything, even restlessness, is part of the grand stillness that life is always offering. As one Zen hermit once wrote in his mountain journal, the pine tree is silent, yet the wind gives it voice. So too, I am silent, and life speaks through me. Let that be your mantra for this journey. The following stories will not instruct, but invite. They will not tell you what to believe. They will show you what to see. Some will unfold in the temple courtyard, others by rivers or within dreams. Each will carry a small candle of realization, sometimes bright, sometimes barely glowing, yet always enough to light the next step of your path. So let go now. Let your awareness flow like water slipping past stones. The less you grasp, the more you see. The less you seek, the more you find. In this still moment, the bell of the temple rings again, slow, resonant, fading into infinity. You listen not to the sound, but to the silence it leaves behind. That silence is your true nature. Breathe once more, deeply. You are ready. The stories begin. Story 1. The river beneath the skin. The dawn light spreads softly across the temple courtyard, brushing the stone floor with pale gold. The last stars fade like breath on glass. From somewhere beyond the mist, a bamboo flute drifts through the air, slow, uncertain, like a question searching for its answer. You sit upon the wooden veranda, cross-legged, wrapped in a simple robe. The air is cool against your face, carrying the scent of pine and wet moss. Below, the valley sleeps under a silver fog, the river whispering beneath it. This is the hour before words, the stillest time of day. Even the birds hesitate before breaking the silence. You breathe in. You feel the chest rise, the lungs stretch, the ribs open like wings. You breathe out. The world moves with you. Beside you, the old monk Ryashin sits unmoving, eyes half closed. His face is carved by years of stillness. When he speaks, it is as if the mountain itself has learned to whisper. "Feel the river beneath your skin," he says. You frown softly. The phrase feels strange, like a riddle. Ryashin notices. When you breathe, does it not flow? He continues. When blood moves through your veins, does it not have a current? The river is not outside you. It runs through everything, through the wind, through the bamboo, through you. He dips his fingers into a small bowl of water between you, watching the surface ripple. Awareness is the same, he says. If you stop clutching, it flows. If you try to hold it still, it turns muddy. The monk closes his eyes again. Breathe. Don't force the air. Let the air breathe you. You try. At first, your breath feels mechanical, shallow, awkward. The mind rushes in. Am I doing this right? Should I count? Should I hold longer? Ryashin shakes his head gently without opening his eyes. The leaf does not tell the wind how to blow, he murmurs. The breath knows its path. Follow it like a traveler follows a stream. You let the breath move on its own. The chest rises, falls. The air cools your nostrils, warms as it leaves. After some time, you notice a rhythm that has always been there, quiet, steady, endless. Then something subtle shifts. You feel the pulse at your wrist. You feel warmth spreading down your spine, the tingling of life unfolding in every cell. You sense not a body, but a flowing, a current beneath the skin. Your heart beats, and you can almost hear it echo through your ribs like a drum deep in a forest. Ryashin's voice returns. This is the first gate of mindfulness, the body that feels itself, not as yours, but as nature moving in form. He picks up a small leaf fallen from the cedar tree and places it in your hand. Hold it, he says. You do. It is light, he says, yet it was once heavy with rain. The body is the same, sometimes burdened, sometimes empty, but always alive with change. He looks out at the fog-shrouded valley. When you learn to see your body like this leaf, as part of the forest, then suffering begins to loosen its grip. You stare at the leaf for a long while. Its veins are fine rivers. The texture feels almost human, fragile, yet purposeful. You realize the monk's meaning. The body isn't a cage, it's a bridge. It connects awareness to the earth. Later that morning, you join the monks for kinhin, walking meditation. Bare feet on damp earth, slow, deliberate steps. The sun filters through the pines, and each beam of light seems to carry dust like stars suspended in time. The sound of footsteps becomes rhythm. The body becomes breath. Breath becomes landscape. One of the younger monks slips on a wet rock. He laughs quietly, embarrassed. Ryashin looks at him and says, "Even falling is part of walking." You smile. Each step after that feels different. You're not trying to be mindful. You're simply walking. And somehow that is enough. As you move, your mind begins to soften. Thoughts no longer come as sentences, but as sensations: warmth, weight, air, sound. You notice the way your feet meet the soil, heel, arch, toes. You notice how the balance shifts with each movement, how the muscles coordinate without command. It's as if the body remembers something ancient, the intelligence of motion that existed long before thought. Ryashin's words return in your mind. When awareness flows through the body, it washes away the illusion of control. You understand now. You've spent much of your life trying to use your body, to make it faster, stronger, stiller. But here, in the mountain silence, you learn to listen to it instead. And when you listen, you realize it has been teaching you patience all along. At midday, the monks gather for tea beneath the cypress trees. Steam curls upward from the cups, blending with the mist. Ryashin pours you tea slowly, as though time itself were liquid. He says, "Many people sit in meditation and fight their own bodies. They want the back straight, the mind blank, the breath silent. But Zen is not war with what is natural. It is the art of harmony." He looks into his cup. When you stop demanding perfection from the body, it becomes still on its own. The body is not your servant. It is your companion. You drink in silence. The warmth of the tea moves down your throat, and again you feel that same river flowing. The blood, the breath, the pulse. You realize this river beneath the skin has been here since birth. You never had to create it. You only had to notice. Ryashin continues, "This is the beginning of awakening, to recognize that what you seek is not somewhere else. It is already flowing within you." He places his cup down and adds, "Even pain is part of this river. Even sorrow. They move, they change, they dissolve. Only resistance makes them stay." The words sink deep. You remember all the times you've tried to escape discomfort, running from tiredness, dullness, fear. But now, for the first time, you see that even these are movements of life itself. To feel them is not failure, it is participation. That night, after evening chants, you sit again in the quiet hall. The candles flicker low, their light trembling like small hearts. Outside, the crickets sing softly beneath the moonlight. You rest your palms on your knees, feeling the warmth there. You close your eyes, and this time, you don't try to meditate. You simply listen to the blood, the heartbeat, the soft hum inside your ears. The river flows on. Minutes dissolve into timelessness. Thoughts come and go like drifting petals. There is nothing to do, nowhere to go. You open your eyes. The moon has risen higher, its reflection rippling in the temple pond. You realize that what you feel inside, that flowing aliveness, is the same as what you see outside. The river beneath your skin and the river in the valley are not two. Ryashin's voice echoes in your memory. When you breathe, the mountain breathes with you. When you are still, the stars remember their place. You smile. The silence around you isn't empty. It's alive, shimmering with unseen motion. You feel gratitude rise naturally without words. Gratitude for this breath, this body, this endless river that carries you through each moment of being. And in that awareness, You finally understand the moral hidden within Ryashin's words. When you stop trying to control the body teaches you freedom. When you stop forcing awareness, awareness begins to flow. The candle burns down to a quiet ember. The temple bell rings once, deep and low, rolling through the valley like thunder wrapped in silk. You bow to the silence. The night accepts you completely. Silent mindfulness, letting awareness flow. Story 2: The Bamboo That Bends. Rain falls gently over the mountain temple, each drop a note in nature's endless symphony. The courtyard stones glisten under the silver sky. The bamboo grove at the edge of the path sways and shimmers, bowing to the wind, rising again with grace. You stand there under the eaves, hands tucked in your sleeves, watching the rain ripple across the pond. The reflection of the bamboo moves like breathing. A single leaf detaches and floats down, spinning lazily before landing upon the surface. Old Master Ryashin appears beside you, silent as the rain itself. His straw hat is damp. His robe clings to his shoulders. He does not speak for a long time. Only when a gust of wind rattles the chimes above the gate does he finally say, "See how the bamboo bows to the storm?" You nod. He looks at you, eyes soft but steady. That is why it never breaks. The words linger in the air, heavier than they sound. You know there's a teaching inside them, but you do not yet see it. Ryashin gestures for you to follow him. Together, you walk toward the grove. Rain soaks your sandals, cool and cleansing. The bamboo trunks rise like pillars of patience, tall, slender, each bending yet unbroken. Everyone wishes to be strong, Ryashin says, but true strength has nothing to do with rigidity. It lives in the willingness to yield. You remember how, as a novice, you struggled with meditation. You would sit for hours, jaw clenched, shoulders stiff, determined to succeed. When your mind wandered, you scolded it. When your legs hurt, you fought the pain. You mistook stillness for control. The master continues. You cannot stop the rain, yet you can stop fighting its sound. You cannot command the wind, yet you can bow to it. To resist what is natural is to create suffering where none existed. He takes a thin bamboo stalk in his hand and bends it gently. It arches but does not crack. "Do you see?" he asks. The bamboo doesn't argue with the wind. It moves with it. You watch the curve of the stalk. There's something beautiful about its surrender. Not weakness, but wisdom. It knows its nature. Ryashin releases the stalk and smiles faintly. This is the second gate, letting go of control. The mind believes it must command everything. Thoughts, emotions, even silence itself. But silence cannot be commanded. It only reveals itself when you stop demanding. Later that afternoon, the monks gather in the hall for seated meditation. The rain continues outside, steady, rhythmic. You find your place on the mat. You decide to try again, not to master stillness, but to allow it. You close your eyes. For a while, your breath feels restless. The mind chatters. I should focus. I mustn't move. Then you remember the bamboo. You imagine its soft movement in the wind, the gentle bowing, the return, the effortless acceptance. So you let the thoughts move. You stop fighting them. You let the body breathe itself. Minutes pass. The restlessness fades. Awareness spreads. wide and unhurried. The mind is no longer a clenched fist. It opens like a palm beneath falling rain. A strange stillness fills you. Not the stillness of absence, but of flow. You feel the air pass through your nose, your lungs, your ribs. You hear the rain. You are the rain. There's no border anymore between what is inside and what is outside. Ryashin's voice, distant but clear, echoes in your memory. To let go is to see that there is nothing to hold. You smile faintly. After meditation, you join the others for the evening meal. Simple rice, pickled vegetables, miso soup. Steam rises from each bowl, carrying the scent of earth and warmth. You notice how everything here moves in cycles, day and night, hunger and fullness, tension and ease. Control is an illusion in such a place. Life unfolds perfectly well without your supervision. As the monks eat, no one speaks. Only the sound of chopsticks and the rain beyond the paper doors. You feel gratitude again, not forced but natural, like rain sliding down bamboo. When the meal ends, Ryashin glances at you and says quietly, "Tomorrow, you will sweep the temple paths." You bow. "Yes, master." The next morning, the sky clears. Mist clings to the hillsides, silver threads drifting through pine. You pick up the broom and begin to sweep. The path is long and scattered with fallen leaves. At first, you sweep quickly, eager to finish. The handle creaks, the straw scrapes the stones. But the leaves keep falling, one after another, carried by the morning wind. No matter how much you sweep, the path is never clear. Frustration creeps in. You press harder, trying to control the leaves, trying to force order. Ryashin walks by, watching quietly. Then he stops and says, "Are you sweeping the path or fighting the wind?" You freeze. He points to the trees. The wind will not obey your will. But if you move with it, your broom will dance. You lower your shoulders, loosen your grip. The next sweep feels lighter. You begin to move with the wind, not against it. The leaves drift, swirl, and settle. Some you clear, some you don't. But your breath matches the rhythm of the air, and suddenly the work feels effortless. An hour passes, maybe two. You lose track of time. When you stop, the path looks the same, half clean, half covered. Yet your heart feels entirely different. You realize the lesson was never about the path. It was about the one sweeping. You bow toward the trees. That evening, you find Ryashin by the pond again. He is trimming a broken reed, moving slowly, each motion deliberate. "Master," you say, "today I swept the path without trying to finish it. And for the first time, I felt free." Ryashin smiles faintly. Yes, control is born from fear. The fear that the moment will not unfold correctly unless you guide it. But the moment knows its own way. He throws the trimmed reed into the water and watches it float away. The mind that demands control is like a hand gripping water, he continues. The tighter it squeezes, the less it holds. The pond reflects the fading sunset, crimson, gold, dissolving into dusk. You feel something shift deep within, like a knot loosening. All the times you've tried to get it right, the meditation, the posture, the breath, they all meld away. Maybe awakening isn't about controlling the self, but trusting that even without control, everything moves in harmony. Ryashin turns to you. "Remember this," he says. When the storm comes, the oak breaks, but the bamboo endures. He looks toward the horizon where night gathers over the forest. The mind that bends never shatters. You nod silently. The crickets begin their evening song. The air cools, carrying the scent of wet soil. You close your eyes, breathing slowly. Inside, there's no command, no pressure, only awareness flowing like a quiet stream through every thought and breath. Later, lying on your mat beneath the paper window, you hear the last raindrops dripping from the roof. The moon hides behind clouds, faint light washing the room. You think of the bamboo grove swaying outside, strong, soft, endlessly alive. And you realize the moral of this story, simple yet eternal. To let go is not to lose control, but to return it to life. When you stop resisting, you discover that everything already knows how to flow. The night deepens. The sound of the rain fades. Somewhere, a bell rings, a single tone rolling through the valley, as calm as the breath of the earth itself. You smile into the silence, and it smiles back. You sleep, not as someone mastering peace, but as peace itself. Now breathe slowly, in through the nose, out through the mouth. As the wind passes through bamboo, we pass through thought. This next story, The Lantern and the Shadow, is about awareness of thought and ego, and how light reveals itself only when we stop trying to control its shape. Story 3, The Lantern and the Shadow. A new moon night had wrapped the mountain temple in perfect darkness. The courtyard was a pool of ink. Only the faint glow of lanterns along the veranda hinted that anything existed beyond the silence. You walk with careful steps, holding one of those lanterns in your hand. The flame trembles inside its paper shell, casting a small circle of light that moves wherever you do. The rest, the trees, the path, the old bell tower, remain hidden beyond its reach. Ryashin walks ahead, barefoot, his own lantern swaying gently. He says, without turning, notice how your light blinds you to everything outside it. You stop for a moment, uncertain. The lantern flickers. Your shadow bends across the stones like spilled ink. The master continues. The mind's thoughts are just like this lantern. They seem to illuminate, but they also define, and whatever they define, they separate. You follow him into the inner courtyard, where the night air smells of cedar and rain. A low wind hums through the bamboo, and the paper walls of the meditation hall sigh with it. Ryashin sits down on the wooden steps. He sets his lantern beside him, the flame steady now. Sit, he says. You kneel before him. He points toward your lantern. You think that this light helps you see, but it only shows you what it touches. The true seeing begins when you realize that darkness, too, is part of awareness. He pauses. Most people live trapped inside their lantern, the light of thought, the glow of self. They say, I understand, but what they truly mean is, I understand what fits inside my circle. You gaze at the flame. The shadows around it dance and merge. Ryashin's eyes soften. The mind says, this is me, that is you. It compares, it judges, it tries to hold form. But the self you defend so fiercely is nothing more than shadow projected by a flickering light. You want to ask him how to escape this, but before you can, he says, to escape the shadow, you must stop holding the lantern so tightly. Later that evening, The monks gather for night meditation. The hall is dark except for a few lanterns flickering by the altar. The scent of incense drifts slowly through the air, sandalwood and quiet rain. You sit, breathing in time with the flame's rhythm. You begin to notice how thoughts appear like shadows moving through the light. Some long, some brief, some distorted. One thought says, I am calm. Another says, I am failing. Another whispers, I should do better. Each thought has its own voice, its own shadowy form. You remember Ryashin's teaching, don't fight the shadow, see through it. So you don't push the thoughts away. You simply watch them flicker in and out, rising from nowhere, dissolving into nowhere. They are not you. They are just movements in the lantern's glow. You realize something subtle. The awareness that sees the thought isn't the thought itself. It is older, wider, unmoving, like the mountain beneath the shifting clouds. And in that recognition, a quiet peace begins to settle. The flame steadies. The room feels larger. Even the darkness seems to breathe with you. When the meditation ends, Ryashin stays seated while the others bow and leave. He looks at you and says, tell me, who sat through that meditation? Was it you? You hesitate. I'm not sure. He smiles faintly. Good. The one who knows he doesn't know is already free of half his illusions. You sit beside him again. Outside, the night hums with crickets. He continues, ego is not evil. It is just a lantern that has forgotten the sky. It tries to light the world, but it doesn't realize the world doesn't need its light to exist. He takes a deep breath. When you cling to the idea of I am this or I am that, the lantern grows smaller. But when you release the idea, even for a moment, the darkness turns into space, and in that space, awareness expands infinitely. You listen, unsure if you fully understand, but something inside feels lighter, like exhaling after holding your breath too long. At dawn, the storm passes. You walk to the edge of the pond behind the temple. The water is still, reflecting the pale pink of morning sky. You carry your lantern again, though the sun is rising. You realize the absurdity. The lantern's light is useless now. The whole world glows. Ryashin joins you quietly, a faint smile on his lips. He says, when the sun rises, who still needs a lantern? You laugh softly. No one, master. He nods. And when awareness awakens, who still needs to hold on to thoughts to know they exist? He kneels beside the pond and gently places his lantern on the water. It floats, spinning slowly, the reflection merging with the clouds. This is how the enlightened live, he says. They do not destroy thought. They simply stop mistaking it for truth. Thoughts become like these lanterns, drifting gently across the surface, harmless, beautiful, temporary. You set your own lantern down next to his. Both flames drift side by side. The pond mirrors two suns, trembling and fragile. For a moment, the breeze strengthens and your lantern's flame flickers. You instinctively reach to protect it, but Ryashin stops your hand. Let it go, he says softly. If it goes out, the light remains. You hesitate, then lower your hand. The flame dances, then steadies again. You look up at the real sun breaking over the ridge, immense, bright, utterly still. You feel your chest open, as if something vast has moved inside you. You understand now what Ryashin meant all along. The ego is not something to be destroyed, only understood. It's a lantern in the dark, useful for a time, but never the source of the light itself. That evening, back in the hall, you write in your journal by candlelight. You write not about techniques or lessons, but about what it feels like to see. You write, I am neither the lantern nor the shadow. I am the space where both appear and vanish. When I stop clinging to light or dark, I become the sky itself. You set the brush down, feeling the words fade even as you write them. The candle sputters and goes out, leaving only darkness, and strangely, you no longer mind. In that dark, you feel more alive than ever. You breathe. The night breathes with you. The moral settles quietly, like snow. Awareness does not fight thought, it illumines it. When you let go of the self that clings to light, even shadows become part of the way. Outside, the last lantern drifts across the pond. Its flame finally fades, leaving the reflection of the stars. Infinite, eternal, and utterly silent. You watch until you can no longer tell which is the sky and which is the water. You close your eyes. You smile. You disappear into the vastness that holds it all. Now breathe slowly and deeply. The next story, the sound of the unstruck bell, will guide you deeper into stillness. It's about listening beyond sound, about hearing with the heart rather than the ears. Let your awareness expand like ripples in still water. Silent mindfulness, letting awareness flow. Story 4, the sound of the unstruck bell. The morning mist rolls down from the mountains, blanketing the temple in a hush that feels ancient. The air smells faintly of rain and stone. In the distance, a single temple bell hangs silent, heavy with dew, waiting for the first breath of wind. You walk across the courtyard barefoot, your soles touching the cold stone. Each step feels deliberate, soft, like the earth itself is listening. From somewhere behind the main hall, you hear the drip of water falling from the roof, steady, rhythmic, patient. The world is full of small sounds today, and yet none of them seem to disturb the silence. They belong to it. Ryashin stands beneath the old bell tower, gazing upward. His robe is damp from the fog, his presence still as a stone. He looks at you and says, "Can you hear the bell?" You listen. There is no sound. You shake your head. "No, master." He smiles. "That is because you are listening for it, not with it." You frown slightly, unsure. "Listening with it?" Ryashin nods. There is a difference between listening to something and becoming the listening itself. He closes his eyes. When a true listener is silent, the bell has already rung. The words confuse you, yet they carry a strange gravity, like a koan dropped into the still pond of the mind. You spend the day in silence, doing chores around the temple. The rhythm of sweeping, washing, and preparing rice becomes its own kind of meditation. Each sound, broom against stone, ladle against pot, merges into one continuous breath of existence. After the noon meal, Ryashin calls you to the meditation hall. Inside, the floorboards creak faintly. Shafts of sunlight slip through paper windows, catching dust motes that drift like slow snow. He sits before you and says, "Close your eyes." You obey. "Now listen," he whispers. At first, you hear the obvious things, birds in the distance, the faint rustle of leaves, the beating of your own heart. But Ryashin's voice cuts through softly, deeper. You search for something beyond those sounds, perhaps the wind outside, perhaps footsteps from another monk. Nothing. Deeper still, he says, do not listen for a sound. Listen into it. You inhale slowly. You notice the breath entering and leaving, not as noise, but as vibration. You sense it in your chest, your ears, your skin. You begin to perceive a kind of hum that isn't really a sound, more like the texture of existence itself. Ryashin whispers, that is the sound of the unstruck bell. It rings within everything that exists, even silence. You open your eyes, startled. But I didn't hear anything, Master. I only felt something. He smiles. Exactly. When you no longer separate hearing from being, you begin to perceive the world as it truly is, unbroken, alive, whole. He leans forward slightly. Most people only listen to the surface. Words, tones, meaning. But true listening is surrender. Is the art of disappearing so that only the world remains. You bow your head, absorbing the words. He says, when a bird sings, do not hear the bird. Hear the universe expressing itself through a feathered form. You close your eyes again. This time, the hall feels infinite. You hear the silence behind the sounds, the stillness inside motion, the presence inside absence. And in that space, something within you loosens. The constant commentary, the need to name, the quiet battle of attention, all fade away like fog in the morning sun. Later that evening, a light rain begins. You stand outside beneath the eaves, listening to it patter gently on the stones. The temple lamps glow dimly behind you. The sound of rain fills everything, and yet, between the drops, you hear an even deeper stillness. Ryashin joins you again, holding an umbrella woven from reeds. Tell me, he asks, what do you hear now? You smile faintly. Rain. He nods. And beneath the rain, you pause, eyes closing. Silence. And beneath the silence, you take a deep breath, and the words come without thought. Everything. Ryashin chuckles softly. Good. Now you are hearing as the mountains hear, without distinction. He steps into the rain, not opening the umbrella, letting drops soak his robe. When you listen without resistance, he says, you don't hear sounds, you feel their being. You stand there, rain on your face, eyes open to the night. The world seems to pulse, not as separate noises, but as one living vibration. You realize that sound and silence are not opposites. They are partners in the same dance, the way inhaling and exhaling belong to one breath. That night, the temple sleeps. Only the wind moves through the corridors, whispering through cracks in the old wood. You lie awake, listening to it. You remember Ryashin's words. When the listener disappears, only hearing remains. You turn inward, noticing your heartbeat again. It's no longer just a beat. It's rhythm, life, presence. You feel it merge with the wind, the crickets, the faint creak of the old beams. Everything is music. Everything is stillness. The bell in the tower remains untouched. Yet somewhere inside you, it rings soundless, eternal, full. In that moment, you understand the unstruck bell isn't outside. It is awareness itself, vibrating quietly through all things. At dawn, the first rays of light touch the bell tower. Mist swirls around the bronze surface. You walk to it and place your hand upon the cold metal. You whisper, "I hear you." There's no echo, no sound, just a deep sense of peace, as though the mountain itself had exhaled. Ryashin approaches from behind and nods approvingly. "Now you understand," he says. "You do not need to strike the bell to know it sings. The whole world hums with the soundless song of being." He places a hand on your shoulder. "This is the third gate, the art of deep listening. The soundless sound is always there. You only need to become still enough to notice." He smiles, turning toward the sunrise. When you can hear the bell that was never struck, you can also hear the truth that was never spoken. The valley awakens. Birds call, monks stir, the river murmurs through the mist. You stand there, eyes half closed, and everything seems to whisper the same message. Silence is not empty. It is the fullness of all things speaking together. The moral arises naturally, like breath. When you truly listen, sound and silence dissolve into one. The unstruck bell is the heart, always ringing, always present, even when unheard. You bow to the bell tower before returning to the hall, and as you walk, each footstep sounds like part of a greater rhythm, the song of a world that never stops singing. The listening continues within you. The mountain listens too, and the bell, though untouched, rings forever. Let's continue. Take one long, quiet breath. Let it leave the body softly. This story, the tea that pours itself, is about simplicity and surrender, the next step on your path toward effortless awareness. Let it flow through you like warm tea through an empty cup. Silent mindfulness, letting awareness flow. Story 5, the tea that pours itself. Steam rose gently from the tea room, curling like ghostly fingers toward the paper lanterns overhead. Outside, rain whispered against the moss garden, each drop absorbed by the earth in quiet gratitude. The scent of roasted barley tea filled the air, soft, earthy, grounding. You sat across from Master Ryashin on the tatama floor. Between you, a simple clay teapot rested, still warm from the kettle. The master's hands were steady as he lifted the pot, his every movement deliberate yet unhurried. "This," he said softly, "is Zen." You watched as he poured tea into your cup. The liquid flowed like amber silk, smooth and continuous. He stopped just before the rim, perfectly full, yet never spilling. He handed you the cup and smiled. "Drink slowly, as if time itself were tasting through you." You lifted it to your lips. The warmth touched your fingers before it touched your tongue. You noticed everything: the temperature, the aroma, the way the steam brushed your face. Ryashin watched you silently. After a while, he said, "The tea knows how to pour itself." You looked up, puzzled. "What do you mean, Master?" "You poured it." He chuckled quietly. "Did I? Or did gravity? Or did the teapot? Did the pot pour itself? Or did the water simply find its way?" You blinked, unsure how to answer. He poured again, this time into his own cup. Everything in harmony moves by itself. The tea does not try to pour. The pot does not try to give. It is the nature of things to flow when there is emptiness to receive. He gestured to your cup. "You see?" You held it open. That is all that was required. You sat in silence, the meaning beginning to unfold. Later that morning, Ryashin asked you to join him in the kitchen to help prepare the noon meal. The kitchen was small, only a stone stove, a few pots, a knife dulled from years of use. Yet everything in it seemed to belong perfectly where it was. He handed you a bowl of rice to wash. "Don't rush," he said. "Even washing rice is a prayer." You dipped your hands into the cold water. The grains slid through your fingers, smooth and light. As you stirred them, the water turned cloudy, then clear again. Ryashin said quietly, "Most people live like that water, stirred by their own thinking until everything becomes murky. But when you stop stirring, clarity returns on its own." You paused, the words sinking in. "Zen," he continued, "is not about doing more. It's about doing less, until the doing does itself." He smiled, just like the tea. You worked for some time in silence, and you began to notice the rhythm of your actions, the scrape of ladle, the hiss of boiling water, the breath between movements. Everything seemed to unfold naturally when you stopped trying to hurry. For the first time, you felt a strange lightness, as if invisible hands were guiding your every gesture. When a meal was ready, you and the other monks carried it to the hall. Each movement, placing bowls, pouring soup, offering rice, happened without words. It was not obedience or ritual, it was flow. Ryashin sat at the head of the line and said before anyone began to eat, "When a heart is simple, every action becomes sacred." He raised his bowl and added, "When you stop insisting on control, even the universe begins to cook for you." Laughter rippled softly through the hall. You smiled too, not because of the humor, but because you suddenly understood what he meant. All your life, you believed effort was the key to success. Effort in meditation, effort in understanding, effort in peace. But here, surrounded by steam and silence, you realized that the deepest peace required no effort at all. It came when you stepped aside and allowed life to move. After the meal, you returned to the tea room. The rain had stopped. A single drop hung from the edge of the bamboo spout in the garden, trembling before it fell into the stone basin below. Plink! The sound was small but eternal. Ryashin poured more tea, slower this time. "When you drink," he said, "don't think of drinking. Let the drinking happen. Let life taste itself through you." You lifted the cup again. As the warmth entered your mouth, you didn't feel you drinking. You felt something larger, a harmony between you, the cup, and the tea. The boundaries softened until the act and the doer were one. Ryashin nodded slightly, as if reading your thought. "This is the fourth gate," he said. "Simplicity. When you no longer divide life into what I do and what happens, you begin to flow with the Tao of existence." He gazed at the teapot and continued, "Simplicity is not poverty. It is wealth without possession. It is joy without reason." He lifted the pot and let the last drop fall. "You see, even the pot empties itself when the time comes." That evening, the monks gathered in the courtyard to dry the prayer scrolls that had been dampened by rain. As they worked, one of the novices accidentally tore a corner of scroll. He froze, terrified. Ryashin walked over, examined the tear, and smiled. "Ah," he said, "now it breathes better." The young monk looked confused. Ryashin continued, "Perfection suffocates. Simplicity allows space for truth to enter." He turned to you and added, "That's why even mistakes can be holy if you let them be." The novice exhaled, relief spreading across his face. The moment passed like a cloud, dissolving into blue sky. That night, you sat alone in the tea room. The teapot was empty now, cold. Moonlight entered through the open window, laying silver paths across the floor. You thought of the morning lesson. The tea pours itself. You picked up the pot and tilted it slightly. A single drop remained, catching the moonlight before falling silently into your cup. You stared at it, clear, still, perfect. You whispered to yourself, even without pouring, there is always enough. And in that moment, you understood, life doesn't need your constant interference. It already knows how to flow, how to heal, how to arrive exactly where it must. The less you grasp, the more it gives. The more you surrender, the more it reveals. Outside, a soft breeze passed through the garden. The bamboo leaves rustled, the stone basin rippled, and somewhere distant, a night bird sang. Everything felt effortless, as if the entire universe were exhaling in peace. You realized the moral with a kind of quiet laughter. The tea does not need a hand to pour. It only needs an empty cup. When you stop trying to shape life, it fills you perfectly. You close your eyes and let the words dissolve. The world hummed softly, not as something you controlled, but as something that moved through you. The tea, the breath, the silence, all one. The night deepened. The stars shimmered above the temple roof. And for the first time, you felt completely at ease, not because you understood everything, but because you no longer needed to. The tea pours itself. The heart finally is still. Let the breath come softly now. This story, the cloud that forgot its shape, carries you into the teaching of impermanence and acceptance. It will show that what disappears does not truly die. It simply changes form in the endless sky of awareness. Silent mindfulness, letting awareness flow. Story 6, the cloud that forgot its shape. Afternoon sunlight drifted through the valley, golden and warm. The mountain peaks were veiled in soft white clouds, shifting slowly as though breathing with the earth. From the temple courtyard, you could see the sky stretch endlessly, a living scroll of movement and stillness. Master Ryashin stood beside the pond, his reflection trembling on the water surface. He was watching the sky too, eyes half closed, face calm. "Look," he said, pointing upward, "how easily the clouds become what they must." You followed his gaze. One cloud drifted apart, forming a spiral. Another stretched thin and disappeared into blue. There was no effort, no resistance, only becoming. They changed, Ryashin continued, without fear of what they were. That is the heart of Zen, impermanence without sorrow. You stood silently beside him, feeling a subtle ache in your chest. You had always struggled with letting go of moments, of people, of the versions of yourself you once loved. Sensing your thought, the master said softly, "When you try to hold a cloud, you only grasp air. The beauty was never meant to be kept, only seen." That evening, the sky turned crimson. The monks gathered for sunset meditation on the western terrace. Incense smoke curled upward, blending with the wind. As you sat, your eyes caught the movement of clouds fading into dusk. The wind shifted, and one by one they dissolved. A pang of sadness rose, an unspoken mourning for their disappearance. Ryashin, seated nearby, noticed. "Why do you grieve what was never yours?" You looked at him, startled. He continued, "The clouds come and go as they please. So does joy. So does pain. When you stop demanding permanence from what is transient, the heart learns to rest." He closed his eyes and added, "Everything that leaves returns, but never in the same form." The lesson of the sky is not loss. It is transformation. You breathe slowly, trying to understand. Later, while fetching water from the well, you noticed a child from the nearby village sitting by the gate, crying quietly. His wooden toy had broken in two. You knelt beside him. "Why are you crying?" He sniffled, holding up the pieces. "It's ruined." You looked at the toy, a small carved bird, its wing cracked. Without a word, you picked up a stick from the ground and drew in the dust. A simple image of a bird flying high. "See," you said, "the bird didn't disappear. It just changed where it lives." The boy wiped his eyes. After a long moment, he smiled faintly and whispered, "Then it's free." You nodded. "Yes, free." When you returned to Ryashin with the water, he smiled knowingly. "You see, even a child understands impermanence better than most adults." He poured the water into a bowl and said, "If you can see change not as loss, but as freedom, you begin to live like the sky itself, open, unafraid." Days passed. The seasons shifted quietly. The plum blossoms fell, replaced by summer leaves. The mountain streams swelled with rain. Everything moved in its rhythm, as if choreographed by invisible hands. One afternoon, while sweeping the courtyard, you paused to watch the clouds again. You noticed how none of them ever tried to stay together. They merged, broke apart, and drifted on. There was no tragedy in their vanishing, only grace. A thought came, maybe I'm like that too. You realized how often you had tried to freeze life, to hold on to moments of happiness, to preserve memories, to resist endings. Yet every attempt had only brought pain. Ryashin's voice echoed in your mind. The more you try to keep a form, the quicker it fades. You set down the broom and looked at your own reflection in the pond. It shimmered with the wind, sometimes clear, sometimes broken. You smiled. "Even the reflection changes," you whispered, "but the water remains." That was the lesson. The forms come and go, but awareness, the sky itself, remains untouched. That night, during evening tea, Ryashin said to the monks, "Impermanence is not a tragedy. It is the very reason beauty exists." He poured tea into each cup and added, "Imagine if the flowers never wilted, if the moon never waned, if the seasons never changed. Would you ever notice them?" He looked around the table, eyes glimmering like candlelight. "It is because they end that they shine so brightly." You sipped your tea slowly, tasting the bittersweet truth in his words. Ryashin continued, "A wise monk once said, 'To love something deeply is to bow before its impermanence.' When you can love and let go in the same breath, you have found the middle way." The next morning, a storm swept through the valley. Branches snapped, rain poured in sheets. The wind howled against the temple walls. You and the others moved quickly to protect the scrolls and candles. When the storm finally passed, much of the garden lay scattered, petals, leaves, even a fallen bamboo stalk. You stood in the aftermath, heart heavy at the sight. Ryashin approached, soaked but smiling faintly. "Do you mourn the fallen?" You nodded. "It feels like loss." He picked up a single broken bamboo shoot and held it upright. And yet, by next season, it will nourish new shoots. Nothing truly ends, it only changes its name. He placed the bamboo back onto the earth gently. Acceptance is not indifference, he said. It is trust. Trust that life knows how to recycle itself. You bowed, understanding more deeply now. At twilight, the clouds returned, soft and pink, drifting across the orange sky. You watched them reflect in the wet stones of the courtyard. One, shaped like a dragon, stretched and dissolved into mist. Another formed a perfect circle, then faded. And suddenly, it didn't make you sad anymore. You realized you were watching your own thoughts, your own past, dissolve in the same way, gracefully, naturally. You whispered to yourself, "The cloud that forgets its shape becomes the sky." The words felt true, not as poetry, but as revelation. That night, as crickets sang and the moon rose, you sat quietly beneath the veranda. The air was cool. The scent of wet earth lingered. You closed your eyes and let your breath come and go like clouds passing across a still sky. You felt each inhale form and each exhale dissolve. Birth and death in every breath. You smiled. There was no need to resist anything anymore. The impermanence that once frightened you now felt like freedom, the kind that carries you gently from moment to moment without asking you to stay. And the moral of this story unfolded inside you like dawn over the mountains. To hold on is to suffer. To let go is to see that nothing is ever truly lost. When you stop clinging to form, you discover the sky you always were. Outside, a lone cloud floated past the full moon. For a moment, it covered the light, and then, softly, it disappeared. The moon shone brighter for it. Breathe softly and let your awareness settle like mist over still water. This story, The Mirror in the Stream, will take you deeper into self-reflection and true seeing. It is about facing yourself without distortion, not through judgment, but through quiet honesty. Story 7. The Mirror in the Stream. The morning sun had just risen above the ridge, bathing the temple in gold. A stream ran quietly behind the meditation hall, its water so clear you could see the pebbles gleaming at the bottom like small jewels. The sound of its movement was delicate, not rushing, not still, but breathing. You often came here after morning meditation, drawn by the way the water reflected everything yet clung to nothing. Today, the air was crisp and your breath rose in soft clouds. You knelt beside the stream, gazing into it. Your face looked back at you, wavering slightly with the current. Master Ryashin appeared behind you, his reflection joining yours in the water. He stood silently for a long moment before saying, "What do you see?" "Myself," you answered. He tilted his head. "Do you?" You looked again, your features, your eyes, the play of light and ripple. "Yes, Master." Ryashin smiled faintly. "Then tell me, which one is you? The face above the water or the one below it?" You hesitated. The question felt simple, yet it lingered like an echo in a cave. You realized neither was truly stable. Both changed with every flicker of light. Ryashin crouched beside you. The stream teaches the first lesson of self. Reflection is never reality. The moment you try to grasp it, it moves. He dipped his finger into the water. Your reflection shattered into ripples. "See, The you see is only a dance of surface. That day, during temple chores, the thought stayed with you. Every time you caught your reflection in a bowl, a window, the pond, you noticed how it changed depending on where you stood, how much light there was, and how calm or agitated the surface had become. You began to realize that your inner reflections behaved the same way. When the mind was disturbed, your sense of self wavered. When the mind was clear, you could see things as they were. Ryashin seemed to sense this. During the evening walk through the garden, he said, "The ego's reflection depends on the mind's surface. Turbulent thoughts create distorted images, and people believe those distortions are truth." He paused, tapping his walking stick lightly against the stones. This is why self-reflection in Zen is not about judging what you see. It's about calming the water until the truth reflects itself naturally. The next morning, a visitor arrived, a wandering merchant who often brought supplies to the monastery. He was proud, loud, always eager to impress. While delivering rice and cloth, he said to Ryashin, "Master, your monks seem humble. I wish to learn your meditation so I too can find peace." Ryashin poured him tea. "Very well," he said, "but before you meditate, go to the stream behind the hall and tell me what you see." The merchant went. A few minutes later, he returned, frowning. "I saw my face, master, but the water rippled, so it looked uneven." Ryashin nodded. "That is your mind." The merchant scowled. "Are you saying my mind is uneven?" The master smiled gently. "No, I am saying your mind believes it must always look perfect." The merchant said nothing, but his pride stiffened his shoulders. Ryashin continued, "Come back tomorrow morning. Look again when the stream is still." The next day, dawn was calm. The merchant knelt again by the stream. This time, the water reflected him clearly, every line, every imperfection. He stared at it for a long time. When he finally returned to Ryashin, he said quietly, "I saw myself too clearly. It frightened me." Ryashin nodded. Most men fear their reflection not because it lies, but because it doesn't. The merchant bowed deeply. That day, he stayed for meditation, silently, humbly, and left without another word. You thought about this long after he was gone. How often had you also resisted seeing yourself honestly? Your fears, your restlessness, your quiet longing to be special. That night, Ryashin found you again by the stream. The moon reflected perfectly in the water, silver and complete. He said softly, "People polish their outer lives endlessly, but few polish the mirror of the heart. And when they look into it, they see not what is there, but what they wish to see." You asked, "How do I polish this mirror?" He replied, "By doing nothing, only letting stillness return. The clearer the water, the more truth it shows. But remember this, the mirror is not for vanity, it is for vanishing." You frowned slightly. "Vanishing?" He smiled. "When you see clearly, the one who sees disappears." You watched the moon in the stream again. The surface trembled with a passing breeze, then stilled. The moon returned, not broken, not restored, just there. You understood in part. The moon had never been lost. Only the ripples had hidden it. Days passed. You practiced self-reflection in small ways, not by analyzing thoughts, but by noticing them. You saw anger arise and fade, joy appear and vanish. You realized that what you called you was a series of reflections, moods, roles, shifting identities, none of which stayed long enough to be truly owned. During evening meditation, Ryashin said, "Do not try to fix the reflection, fix the seeing." You felt the depth of that teaching. One morning, heavy rain fell. The stream overflowed, its surface chaotic and dark. You couldn't see your reflection at all. For a moment, frustration returned, the desire to control, to clear, to make it still. But then you remembered Ryashin's words. Reflection cannot be forced. It returns when it is ready. So you simply sat and listened to the water. Hours later, when the rain stopped, the stream calmed itself. Without any effort from you, the reflection returned, clearer than before. You smiled. The mirror of the world needs no fixing, only patience. That evening, Ryashin joined you once more. The two of you sat beside the stream in silence. The moon rose, full and bright. After a long while, the master said, "The stream reflects the moon perfectly because it never tries to be the moon. The ego suffers because it tries to become its reflection." You close your eyes. The words settle deep inside. You realize that to truly see yourself was not to cling to the image, beautiful or flawed, but to let the seeing itself dissolve into presence. When you open your eyes again, the moon, the stream, and your reflection had all merged into one shimmering whole. And in that stillness, you felt the truth gently unfold within you. When the water is clear, you see everything. When the mind is clear, you become everything. You bowed to the reflection in the stream, whispering, "Thank you, mirror that never lies." The water shimmered once more, then returned to perfect stillness, empty, pure, infinite. The moral rippled quietly through you like moonlight on water. You are not the reflection, nor the ripples. You are the awareness in which both appear. When you stop seeking yourself in the mirror, you find yourself in the whole sky. You stayed there until the stars appeared, watching how each glimmer found its place on the moving water. And you realized, even when the stream shifts, the stars remain. So does awareness. So do you. Settle your breath again, slow and deep. Let your awareness open like a flower at dawn. This story, the flower that never asked to bloom, teaches effortless being and natural growth. It reminds us that true progress in life and spirit does not come from striving, but from allowing. Story 8, the flower that never asked to bloom. Morning light crept softly through the temple gardens. Dew rested on every petal, glinting like crystal beads. The scent of damp earth and pine mingled with the faint smoke of incense drifting from the meditation hall. You were tending to the garden that day, kneeling by the path that curved around a small lotus pond. The soil was cool beneath your fingers. Each breath carried the rhythm of stillness. Ryashin walked quietly toward you, his sandals brushing the stones. In his hand, he held a single white chrysanthemum, freshly cut. He stopped beside you and said, "This flower bloomed without asking when or how." You looked up. "Yes, master." He placed it gently into a small clay vase near the pond. "Do you think it worried about being beautiful?" You smiled faintly. "No, master." Ryashin nodded. "That is why it is." He gazed at the petals for a moment. All of nature grows without anxiety. The tree doesn't try to reach the sky. the sky invites it upward. Only humans forget this law and try to force what is already happening. You lowered your eyes, understanding his meaning too well. In meditation, you had often strained to achieve calm, to feel enlightened, to be still, to get it right. But the more you tried, the more restless your mind became. Ryashin knelt beside you. When you stopped trying to bloom, you realize you already have. That afternoon, he took you to the lower garden, where young monks were planting saplings. One of them, impatient, was patting the soil too firmly around a small pine. "Careful," Ryashin said. "If you press too hard, the roots cannot breathe." The young monk frowned. "But I want it to grow strong." The master smiled. "Strength comes from freedom, not force." He pointed toward the old cedar towering above them. That tree was once smaller than your hand. No one pulled it upward. It simply grew because it knew nothing of impatience. The monk bowed, loosening the soil. The sapling leaned slightly, free to sway. You watched quietly, realizing that you had spent much of your life tightening the soil around your own growth, trying to control when and how things would unfold. Ryashin turned to you and said, "Effort that is born from striving creates struggle. Effort that is born from awareness creates harmony. The flower works, yes, but without resistance." Later, while walking by the lotus pond, you saw one bud still closed among the open blooms. A part of you wished it would unfold, for the sake of completion, for beauty. But then you remembered Ryashin's words and smiled. "It will bloom when it's ready." A gentle breeze rippled across the water. You noticed the reflection of clouds drifting through the pond, changing shape with every gust of air. You thought, the clouds never hurry, yet they always arrive. You sat there for a while, feeling something inside you loosen, the habit of forcing life to match your will. The pond mirrored the sky's ease, and for the first time, you allowed yourself to rest without expectation. That evening, during tea, Ryashin poured your cup slowly. "You look peaceful," he said. "I stopped trying," you replied. He chuckled. "Good. Trying to be peaceful is the surest way to disturb peace." He sipped his tea and added, "This is the essence of the fifth gate, effortless being. Zen is not about becoming calm. It is about realizing that calmness was never lost." He set his cup down. "When you see this truth, life becomes like breathing, natural, spontaneous, inevitable." He pointed toward the window, where a small moth circled the lantern. Even the moth fulfills its purpose without knowing it. It flies because that is its nature. You meditate because awareness is yours. You bowed your head. "Then why do we forget, Master?" Ryashin smiled gently. "Because we try too hard to remember." The next morning, before dawn, you returned to the lotus pond. Mist lay over the water, soft and white. You sat on the edge, breathing quietly. The closed bud from yesterday had begun to open, not suddenly, but slowly, as if waking from a long dream. The petals unfolded in silence, dew catching the faint light of dawn. You realized you were witnessing something sacred, life revealing itself without demand. And you understood the flower never asked to bloom. It simply responded to light. So too, your awareness blooms naturally in the presence of stillness. You whispered, "This is how awakening happens, not by force, but by gentle readiness." That day, during work, one of the younger monks approached you with worry. I've been meditating for months, he said, but I feel nothing. No peace, no progress. You smiled kindly. That is because you're waiting for results. He frowned. Then what should I do? Stop waiting, you said. He looked confused, but you continued. Peace doesn't come when you earn it. It comes when you stop arguing with what is. He nodded slowly, perhaps not fully understanding, but sensing the truth. Later, Ryashin overheard and said softly, "Ah, you have begun to teach without trying. That means the flower is blooming." You smiled, humbled. "I only repeated your wisdom, master." He shook his head. "No, you repeated silence." That night, a gentle rain began to fall. You stepped outside the meditation hall, feeling the drops on your face. The lotus pond shimmered under the rain, petals trembling but not resisting. Each drop was absorbed effortlessly, without struggle, the way life should be received. Ryashin appeared beside you, holding no umbrella. "See how the rain nourishes without asking permission," he said. "It gives because giving is its nature." He turned to you. The awakened person lives like that, doing without doing, loving without trying, blooming without plan. The sound of rain deepened around you, soothing and steady. The world seemed perfectly balanced, effortless, free. You felt a deep stillness rise within. It wasn't joy exactly. It was quieter than joy, a contentment so natural it felt invisible. You understood the moral in that moment without needing words. When you stop forcing growth, you discover that you are already growing. Life blooms in its own time. Awareness unfolds on its own light. The rain eased. The air smelled of earth and renewal. In the pond, the lotus flower now stood fully open, illuminated by moonlight. You bowed to it, whispering, "Thank you for not hurrying." A breeze passed, rippling the petals. The flower said nothing, and yet it answered perfectly. Slow your breath again. Feel it rise, fall, and fade into quiet. This next story, The Monk and the Broken Cup, flows naturally from what came before. It teaches gratitude and presence. The peace found not in having, but in noticing. Silent mindfulness, letting awareness flow. Story 9, The Monk and the Broken Cup. The afternoon light filtered through the shoji screens, scattering soft patterns across the wooden floor. The day was warm and still. You sat in the tea room beside a low table, polishing the few clay cups that the monks used during their evening gatherings. One of the cups, old and worn, had a small crack running along its side. You traced it with your finger, feeling the uneven line, the roughness that the others didn't have. It was Ryashin's favorite cup. He used it every day, chipped, discolored, imperfect, yet handled it with the tenderness one might give a rare treasure. As you worked, Ryashin entered quietly. His steps were soundless on the tatami mat. He stood for a moment, watching you. Then he asked, "What do you see when you look at that cup?" You smiled faintly. "An old vessel that should have been replaced years ago." He chuckled softly. "Ah, then you see only with your eyes." He sat down opposite you, reaching for the cup. "When I drink from this, I remember that everything is already broken, and that is why I am gentle with it." You looked at him, puzzled. "Already broken?" Ryashin nodded, running a thumb along the crack. "Yes, the cup will shatter one day, perhaps by accident, perhaps by time. I drink knowing that. So every sip becomes sacred. He poured himself tea and held the cup to his lips. Steam rose between you like a spirit. This is gratitude, not for permanence, but for presence. That evening, after the last chant, you walked through the temple grounds. The sun had slipped behind the hills, painting the sky in faint lavender. You carried the old cup with you, thinking about what the master had said. Near the gate, you met a novice monk sweeping the path. His broom knocked against a small stone, and the sound startled him. The broom slipped, brushing against the cup in your hand. It fell. Time slowed. The cup struck the ground and split into 3 pieces. The sound was sharp, brief, final. The novice froze, face pale. I'm sorry, he stammered. I didn't mean to. You knelt, gathering the fragments. A pang of guilt rose, but strangely, it didn't last. Instead, you remembered Ryashin's words. Everything is already broken. You smiled gently. It's all right. The novice looked confused, but it was a master's cup. You placed the fragments on your palm. It still is. When Ryashin found you later, you bowed deeply and offered him the broken pieces. Master, I dropped your cup. He took them carefully, examining each one. His eyes were calm, unreadable. After a moment, he said, then the cup has completed its purpose. You blinked. You're not upset. He smiled. Would you be upset if a sunset ended? You hesitated. No, because I know it will return. Ryashin nodded, and so will the clay. Perhaps not as a cup, but as something else. He placed the pieces on the table, turning one over to reveal the shimmer of glaze. The crack is not failure. It is proof that it lived. He looked at you. Do you see now why I drank from it with such care? Because I knew one day this moment would come. You bowed your head. Every moment, he continued, is a fragile cup. You cannot keep it, but you can hold it with reverence. Gratitude is not saying, I am happy this lasted. Gratitude is saying, I'm glad I was here while it did. The next day, Ryashin gathered the monks in the garden. He placed the broken cup pieces in the center of a circle of stones. Today, he said, we learn the art of kintsugi, golden repair. From a small box, he produced a tiny jar of gold lacquer. One by one, the monks helped him fit the pieces together, brushing the cracks with thin lines of shining gold. When it was finished, the cup gleamed, not as it once was, but as something reborn. Ryashin held it up. Now it holds more than tea, he said. It holds a story of impermanence, of care, of returning to wholeness without hiding what has been broken. He passed it to you. Do you understand? You nodded. Its beauty comes from what it survived. He smiled. So does yours. That night, after the hall was dark, you sat outside under the stars with a mended cup beside you. The gold lines caught the moonlight, glowing softly. You poured tea into it and watched the steam rise, just as it had before. Yet everything felt different now. You lifted it slowly, aware of its weight, its fragility, its second life. Each sip carried not only warmth, but deep awareness that this could be the last, and that was enough. A breeze brushed past. The candle beside you flickered. You whispered, "Thank you." It was unclear whether you were thanking the tea, the cup, or the moment itself, perhaps all three. When Ryashin found you there, he said softly, "When gratitude is pure, it doesn't need an object. It simply flows." He sat beside you. The world is constantly breaking and mending. Our task is not to resist, but to remain awake through both. He looked at the stars. Do you know why the night sky shines? You shook your head. Because it holds both darkness and light without choosing one over the other, he said. That is how gratitude works. It doesn't demand perfection, it honors what is. You smiled quietly, like drinking from a broken cup. He nodded. Exactly. And when you can see that even the broken things are sacred, you have found the still point of mindfulness. You sat together in silence. The cup rested between you, glinting faintly in the starlight. You realized then that life, too, was like that cup, fragile, temporary, full of cracks, yet capable of reflecting beauty if held with care. And within you, the moral formed like a soft whisper. The moment you stop clinging to what you have, gratitude begins to bloom. To be present is to drink from the cup while it still holds warmth. The wind rose briefly, scattering the scent of pine and tea. Somewhere, a bell rang in the distance. You lifted the mended cup once more. The gold lines caught the light like veins of sunlight trapped in clay. You bowed your head and took a final sip, not out of thirst, but reverence. It tasted like silence. Close your eyes for a moment. Let the breath move gently in and out, like a tide that never ends. This story, The Fisherman's Lantern, speaks of trust and faith in the unknown. It is about walking in darkness without fear, knowing that light reveals itself only when you stop demanding it. Story 10, The Fisherman's Lantern. Night settled over the valley, soft and endless. The temple's lanterns burned low, their light flickering on the wooden beams. Beyond the gate, the river murmured, steady, ancient, unbroken. You walked along the path that led to the water, guided by a single paper lantern in your hand. Its flame glowed faintly, trembling with every breath of wind. Master Ryashin followed at a quiet distance. His presence felt more than seen. As you neared the shore, the sound of the river grew louder, mingling with the rhythm of crickets and the rustle of reeds. A small boat was moored there, swaying gently in the current. In it sat an old fisherman, his back slightly bent, his lantern dangling from a thin bamboo pole. Ryashin greeted him with a bow. Evening, Haru. The fisherman smiled, his eyes deep and kind. Evening, master. The river is dark tonight. The fish are hiding. Ryashin gestured for you to sit by the shore. The fisherman looked at you and said, "Do you know how to fish in darkness?" You shook your head. He lifted the lantern and held it over the water. You wait. You frowned slightly. Just wait. The old man chuckled. Yes, the river doesn't need your impatience. It gives when it chooses. He lowered the lantern again, its reflection quivering on the surface. I've fished this river for 50 years, he said. When I was young, I threw the net too soon. The fish swam away. Now I cast it only when the river tells me to. You looked at Ryashin, who smiled. The fisherman trusts what he cannot see, he said. That is why the river feeds him. The three of you sat in silence. The night was thick, moonless, vast. The only light came from the two lanterns, swaying gently in the wind. The fisherman cast his net, slow, fluid, without effort. The ripples spread and faded into darkness. You couldn't see the fish. You couldn't see the net's reach. All you could do was wait. Minutes passed. The sound of water filled the night, unhurried. Then a soft tug on the line. The fisherman pulled, calm and steady. From the dark water emerged two shimmering fish, glistening under the lantern's glow. He smiled faintly. See? The river speaks when you are quiet enough to listen. He handed you one of the fish. Here, a gift from what you didn't control. You held it carefully, feeling the life pulsing within it. For a moment, you understood what he meant. The river, like life itself, cannot be forced. It responds only to trust. As you walked back toward the temple, Ryashin said, "The fisherman teaches the sixth gate, faith in the unknown, to walk the path without needing to see the destination." He stopped and turned to you. "Tell me, when you walk with your lantern, what do you see?" You look down at the circle of light around your feet. Only the ground ahead, and beyond it, darkness. He nodded, and yet you keep walking. That is faith. The light need not reveal the whole road, only the next step. You thought about that as you walked. The circle of light moved with you, small but sufficient. You realized that no matter how long the path, it always began with the space your feet already touched. Later that night, in your room, you placed the lantern beside you and watched the flame. Its dance was delicate, almost uncertain. You wondered how many times in life you had demanded certainty from others, from yourself, from the future. You realized how much suffering came from needing to know before you could move. Now, sitting in silence, you saw the foolishness of that need. The flame's light didn't reach the whole room, yet it was enough to keep you from stumbling. That was all that was ever required. Ryashin's voice echoed in your memory. The mind wants to see the whole path. The heart only needs to trust the step it takes. The next day, the fisherman returned to the temple carrying a small basket of fish. He placed it before Ryashin and bowed. Ryashin accepted the gift with a smile. "Your patience is deeper than the river itself, Haru." The old man laughed. "When you've lived long enough, master, you learn that the river always gives, just not always what you expect." Ryashin looked at you. "Do you understand his wisdom?" You nodded. "He waits without fear." "Good," said the master, "because fear is what clouds the river of the mind. When you trust the flow, the right moment reveals itself naturally." He poured tea for all three of you. The steam curled upward, merging with the light. Ryashin said, "Faith is not blind hope. It is seeing clearly that control is unnecessary." The fisherman smiled. "In gratitude for what comes, fish or empty nets alike." You drank the tea slowly. The warmth spread through you like a quiet sunrise. That evening, as dusk settled again, you went alone to the riverbank. The air was still. The fisherman's boat was gone, but his empty lantern remained tied to the bamboo pole, swinging gently. You lit it and set it adrift on the water. The flame floated away, small against the vast night. You whispered, "Wherever you go, I trust you." The lantern bobbed once, then drifted steadily down the current, its reflection shimmering and breaking in the moving water. For a moment, you imagined it as your own heart, glowing, uncertain, but moving faithfully toward what it could not see. The river accepted it completely. You sat there long after the light had faded from view. The sound of the current filled your ears, the same rhythm that had always been there, eternal, patient, alive. You realized that the river was never dark. Only your eyes needed time to adjust. In that realization, you felt a peace deeper than certainty. You didn't need to know where the current led. You only needed to trust that it led somewhere. As you rose to return to the temple, you saw the faint glimmer of dawn beginning to touch the sky. The moral revealed itself as naturally as light revealing the mountains. Faith is not about knowing the way. It is about walking even when you don't. When you trust the flow, the river itself becomes your lantern. You walk back through the quiet forest. Every sound, the crunch of gravel, the whisper of wind, the murmur of water, felt like a promise that everything, seen and unseen, moved in harmony. The path ahead was still dim. You didn't mind. Your heart carried its own light now. Breathe in deeply, let it go softly. This story, The Brush and the Wind, carries the lesson of creativity and non-attachment. It speaks to the moment when expression becomes free of ego, when art, work, and even thought flow not from you, but through you. Story 11, The Brush and the Wind. The day began with a pale mist hanging over the temple valley. The air smelled of pine sap and rain-soaked earth. A flock of white cranes moved slowly across the sky, wings slicing through silence. You entered the art room after morning meditation. Sunlight filtered through paper windows, illuminating the old brushes and inkstones lined neatly on a wooden shelf. The scent of ink, deep, mineral, grounding, filled the air. Master Ryashin stood before a large sheet of rice paper stretched across the table. In his hand, he held a brush, long and slender, its bristles black with ink. He dipped the tip gently into the ink bowl and paused. The moment stretched, no movement, no breath. Then, with one effortless stroke, he drew a single curved line across the page. It looked simple, yet alive, like wind caught in still form. He set the brush down and turned to you. "The hardest thing to paint," he said, "is nothing." You frowned slightly. "Nothing, master?" He nodded. "Yes. To paint nothing, you must vanish while doing it." You didn't understand. You had spent weeks trying to learn calligraphy, struggling to control each line, each pressure. Every mistake had felt personal. Ryashin saw your confusion. He smiled. "Come, try." He motioned for you to take another sheet of paper. Your hands trembled slightly as you picked up the brush. "Breathe once," he said. "Now, when you exhale, let the stroke happen by itself." You exhaled and moved the brush. The line came out crooked. He looked at it for a long moment, then said quietly, "Beautiful." You shook your head. "It's uneven." "Of course," he said. "So is the wind." You spent the next hour practicing, brush after brush, line after line. None were perfect, but something inside you began to relax. Each stroke became less about control, more about rhythm. Ryashin watched in silence. Then he said, "When the wind moves through the bamboo, it doesn't worry about the sound it makes. That is art, expression without ownership." He lifted one of your papers and studied it. "This one," he said, pointing to a slightly blurred line, "is alive because you forgot yourself for half a breath." He placed the paper down carefully. If you chase perfection, your art dies. If you let imperfection breathe, it becomes true. You felt a weight lift from your chest. For so long, you had believed creativity was about mastery, about proving skill. Now you began to see it as a kind of surrender. That afternoon, you joined Ryashin on the veranda overlooking the garden. A light breeze stirred the chimes. The master brought his brush and paper outside. He dipped the brush in water, not ink, and began to paint on the wooden floor. The lines glistened briefly, then vanished as the sun dried them. You watched, stunned. "Why paint if it disappears?" you asked. He smiled. "Because painting is not for keeping. It is for breathing." He gestured toward the empty boards. The water returns to air, the air to sky. The art completes its circle. You thought about how often you had tried to keep what you created, to preserve it, to claim it, to be remembered for it. And now, here was your teacher painting with water that would vanish in minutes, and somehow it felt truer than anything permanent. Later, while walking through the temple corridor, you passed a young monk repairing an old mural. He was frustrated, wiping away his mistakes again and again. You stopped beside him. "What troubles you?" He sighed. "Every time I fix one part, another smudges." You smiled softly. "Maybe stop fixing." He looked puzzled. "Then it will stay wrong." Or you said, "It will stay alive." He stared at the wall for a moment, then began to paint with a lighter hand. The strokes flowed more easily. You left him there, still unsure if he understood, but you did. Ryashin's words echoed. The wind doesn't edit its sound. That night, you found the master again in the art room. He was staring at an unfinished scroll, a single line that stopped midway across the page. "Will you finish it?" you asked. He smiled. "It already is." He rolled the paper gently and tied it with a thin cord. Completion is an idea of the mind. The universe finishes every stroke for us. He turned to you. Art and meditation are the same. They begin when the self ends. You nodded slowly. "So, to create, I must disappear?" He chuckled softly. "You must forget who you think you are long enough for something real to appear." He dipped his brush again, this time into clear water. "And remember, even the empty page is part of the painting." The next morning, you rose early and went to the garden with your brush and paper. The world was silent except for the soft hum of cicadas. You sat by the pond and began to paint the ripples, the reflection of clouds, the curve of reeds. But halfway through, the wind picked up, blowing your paper into the water. You reached to grab it, then stopped. The paper floated, sank slowly, and dissolved. The ink spread through the pond like drifting smoke. You watched it disappear, strangely at peace. The pond had finished your painting. When you told Ryashin later, he smiled. "Then your art has found freedom." He placed a hand on your shoulder. "Remember this. What the wind touches, it transforms. What you cling to, it withers. Create as the wind moves, giving shape, then releasing." He looked out toward the trees. "That is the seventh gate. Creativity without possession." He paused, then added, "When you no longer seek to make something last, you begin to touch eternity." That evening, after the lamps were lit, you sat before a blank sheet of paper. You dipped your brush into ink, then hesitated. You looked at the darkness in the bowl, the reflection of the candle flame quivering on its surface. You felt the rhythm of your breath, the pulse in your wrist, the silence in the room. Then you moved, not deciding, not controlling, just letting the brush glide. When you finished, you looked down and saw something simple, a single swirl that looked like wind caught in motion. It wasn't perfect, but it was alive. You smiled. You blew gently across the ink until it dried, and then you rolled the paper and set it aside, not as an achievement, but as an offering. The moral flowed through you like air through open palms. Create not to possess, but to participate. When you let go of the artist, the art paints itself. Outside, the night wind rose. It passed through the bamboo, through the open doors, and across your drying paper. It lifted one edge, made it flutter once, then fall still. You bowed to it. The wind, you whispered, completes every brushstroke. And in that moment, the artist and the air were one. Breathe again, slowly, deeply, like waves rolling in and out. This next story, The Pebble and the Ocean, is about humility and oneness. It shows how even the smallest thing belongs to everything, and how recognizing that truth dissolves pride and fear. Story 12, The Pebble and the Ocean. Dawn spread gently across the sea like the unfolding of a silk cloth. The horizon shimmered, gold fading into blue, and waves lapped softly against the rocks below the temple cliffs. The monks often came here at sunrise to chant, their voices blending with the rhythm of the water. But this morning, Ryashin walked alone with you, carrying no bell, no beads, only silence. He stopped near the edge of the cliff, where the wind smelled of salt and mist. The tide was retreating, leaving behind small pools glimmering with the sky's reflection. Ryashin bent down and picked up a pebble, smooth and gray. He held it out in his palm. "This," he said, "is the ocean." You looked at it, puzzled. "It's only a stone, master." He smiled. "Only—" He tossed it lightly into the surf below. It vanished with a faint splash. "Now tell me," he said, "where's the pebble?" You stared at the water. "It's gone." Ryashin shook his head. "No, it has returned." He turned toward you, the sea wind tugging at his robes. To see yourself as small is not humility. To see yourself as separate is ignorance. The pebble does not disappear when it falls into the ocean. It becomes part of what it always was. You walked together along the shore. The sand was cool, scattered with shells and driftwood. The rhythm of the waves seemed to pulse in your own chest, rising, falling, endless. Ryashin pointed to a single wave curling toward the beach. "Watch," he said. The wave rose, glistened, and broke into white foam, merging back with the water. He asked, "Where is the wave now?" You thought for a moment. "It's gone back to the sea." He nodded. "Exactly. It never left it. That is what humility truly means. Knowing you are the wave, but not forgetting you are also the sea." He began walking again. Pride says, "I am the wave, look how I shine." Fear says, "I will vanish when I break." Wisdom says, "I was never separate." Later that morning, the monks gathered to clean the beach after a recent storm. You joined them, picking up debris carried in by the tide. Among the shells and driftwood, you found another pebble, round, dark, and wet. You held it up to the light. It looked ordinary, yet beautiful in its simplicity. Ryashin approached. "Do you think this stone is aware of being small?" You smiled. "Probably not, master." He laughed softly. "Then it is already enlightened." He gestured toward the horizon. To the mountain, it is nothing. To the grain of sand, it is immense. And yet it remains what it is, without needing to compare. He looked at you kindly. "Can you live like that?" You hesitated. "Without comparing? Yes. Without measuring your worth against anything else. Success, failure, praise, silence." When you live as the pebble does, you rest in your true size, infinite. You turn the stone in your hand. It was cool and heavy, yet somehow it felt lighter than before. At midday, after the work was done, you sat with the monks by the water's edge. Ryashin filled a small bowl with seawater and placed it in front of everyone. He said, "The ego is like this bowl. It holds a portion of the sea and calls it mine. But when the bowl breaks, nothing is lost. The water simply returns home." He tilted the bowl gently, letting the water spill back into the waves. "That," he said, "is liberation." The sound of water merging with water was barely audible, but something in your heart stirred. Recognition, release. That evening, the sky turned to fire, orange, rose, violet. The sea reflected it all, calm and endless. You walked alone down to the same shore, holding the pebble you had kept. You knelt and sat on your palm again. So small, you thought, and yet made of the same earth as the mountains, carved by the same wind, washed by the same sea. You realized that everything you called you, your fears, your past, your hopes, were also shaped by the same forces that move the stars and the tides. You whispered, "I am not apart from this." The words weren't a thought, but a knowing, quiet, complete. A wave came in and touched your feet. You let the pebble fall from your hand into the surf. It rolled once, twice, then disappeared. And strangely, your chest felt lighter, as if something within you had also been released. When you returned, Ryashin was lighting the lamps in the meditation hall. You told him what you had done. He nodded. Good. To keep the pebble would have been pride. To throw it away thoughtlessly would have been ignorance. To return it with gratitude, that is humility. He poured you tea and said, "When you truly understand that nothing belongs to you, you stop being poor." You looked into the cup, seeing your reflection ripple on the surface. "Then humility is wealth?" He smiled. "It is the only kind that cannot be lost." Later that night, during meditation, you felt something shift inside. The boundaries of your body seemed softer. The breath came and went without ownership. You were breathing, but it also felt as though the sea itself breathed through you. The sound of waves reached the hall, faint but steady, like the world exhaling peace. You realized that the same rhythm pulsed through your veins, your heartbeat echoing the tide. You weren't watching the ocean anymore. You were the ocean, momentarily shaped into a form that could notice itself. When the bell rang to end the meditation, Ryashin said, "The ego prays, let me dissolve." The awakened one laughs, for it was never solid. He added softly, "You are the sea pretending to be a pebble for a while. When you remember that, all fear of loss disappears." Outside, the moon rose above the horizon, its reflection stretching across the waves like a silver path. You stood there for a long time, listening to the soft hiss of water on stone, and the truth settled deep inside you. The small is not less than the vast. It is the vast in disguise. To bow before the ocean is to bow before yourself. You bowed to the sea. The wind brushed your face as if in blessing. And somewhere, far beneath the surface, a single pebble rested. No longer separate, no longer small, forever home. Let the breath slow again until it feels like the world is breathing through you. This story, the candle and the wind, opens the next gate. Detachment from desire, and inner balance. It shows that peace is not found in fighting desire, but in understanding its nature, to flicker, to fade, and to illuminate when balanced. Story 13: The Candle and the Wind. Night had settled over the temple like a velvet cloak. The halls were dark except for the faint glow of a single candle burning before the Buddha statue. Its flame trembled gently, sending thin ribbons of smoke upward into the silence. You sat beside it, cross-legged on the cool wooden floor. Your eyes followed the flicker, constant movement, yet never leaving its center. Ryashin entered quietly and sat across from you. He gazed at the candle without speaking. For a long time, neither of you moved. The flame danced between you, golden and alive. Finally, he said softly, "Desire is like this flame." You nodded, thinking you understood. "It can burn us." He smiled faintly. "Yes, but it also gives light." You frowned slightly. "So we must extinguish it carefully?" He shook his head. "No, we must understand the wind." A gentle draft slipped through the open door. The flame bent sideways, but did not go out. Ryashin said, "When the wind is too strong, the flame dies. When there is no wind at all, it suffocates. Only when there is balance does it burn clearly." He looked at you. "So it is with desire. Too much, and it consumes you. Too little, and life grows dim. But when guided by awareness, desire becomes illumination." You thought of all the things you had once wanted: recognition, comfort, certainty. You had called them distractions, even sins. Yet now, under Ryashin's gaze, you wondered if they were simply untrained winds. The next day, while helping prepare offerings in the temple, you watched a novice polishing brass bowls. He rubbed so vigorously that one slipped and fell, denting its side. Frustrated, he cursed softly. "I wanted it to shine perfectly." Ryashin, passing by, said gently, "Then polish with less wanting." The novice blinked. "Less wanting?" Ryashin nodded. "When the heart burns too hot, even devotion becomes destruction." He picked up the dented bowl, turning it in his hands. "See this mark? It's what happens when effort forgets balance. But if you polish with love instead of pride, the bowl and you will shine together." You heard those words and felt them echo inside. Less wanting. That evening, as dusk turned the sky to rose and indigo, Ryashin took you to the temple courtyard. Dozens of small candles had been lit along the stone path. Their collective light shimmered in the growing dark. He gestured toward them. "Each flame is a desire," he said. "One for love, one for beauty, one for truth. Without them, life would be night without stars." He picked up one candle and handed it to you. "But remember, the candle doesn't burn for itself. Its purpose is to give light, not to possess it." You held it carefully. The wax warmed your fingers. The flame felt both fragile and powerful. Ryashin continued, "When you chase desire only for your own sake, you smother the flame with greed. When you ignore it completely, you deny the part of life that wants to bloom. The middle way is to let desire exist, but to serve, not to enslave." You watched the candlelight reflecting in his eyes. "Then how do I know when desire serves awareness and when it controls me?" He smiled. "When your wanting hurts others, it is fire. When it illuminates compassion, it is light." Later that night, as you prepared for meditation, A gust of wind entered the hall through the open window. The candle before you flickered wildly and went out. Darkness wrapped the room. You sighed softly, reaching for a match, but stopped. Ryashin's voice came back to you. Understand the wind. You sat still, listening. The air moved gently through the paper doors, cool and steady. The flame had not failed. It had yielded. You close your eyes, feeling the same wind touch your skin, stir your breath. You realize desire worked the same way. It rose, it fell, it shifted direction, but it was never truly gone. It simply changed form. You inhaled slowly, exhaled even slower, and within that rhythm, a new light appeared, not from fire, but from awareness itself. The next morning, you told Ryashin what had happened. He nodded. Good. You didn't try to force the flame back. When you stop fighting what fades, something deeper begins to glow. He handed you a fresh candle. Relight it, not because you must, but because you choose. You struck the match and watched the flame return. It felt different this time, calmer, steady. Ryashin said, when a mind no longer fears the wind, it finds peace even in change. He looked out at the garden where new blossoms opened under sunlight. Desire isn't the enemy. Attachment is. Let your wishes come and go like seasons. Burn brightly, but never cling. That afternoon, you and the monks worked to clean the temple courtyard after a windstorm. As you gathered leaves and twigs, you noticed that many of the small candles from the night before had gone out. A novice sighed. All that effort for nothing. You smiled. No, for everything. The night was bright while it lasted. He looked at you curiously, then smiled back. You realized then that peace wasn't about extinguishing every flame inside you. It was about seeing the beauty in each one's brief light. At sunset, Ryashin called everyone together in the meditation hall. He lit a single candle and said, "This is the self when it burns for truth, small, flickering, but capable of endless reflection." He gestured to the window. The breeze entered again, brushing the flame gently but not extinguishing it. He said, when awareness holds the heart steady, even the strongest wind becomes dance. He looked around at the monks. This is the 8th gate, balance between fire and air. Without wind, there is no movement. Without flame, there is no light. Together, they make life visible. That night, you sat again before your candle. The flame bent, straightened, bent again. Each movement was perfect. You felt within yourself both the fire and the wind, desire and stillness, existing not as opposites, but as one rhythm. And the moral unfolded gently inside you, like dawn over mountains. To desire wisely is to let the flame burn without burning you. When you stop fearing the wind, the light becomes your teacher. You blew the candle out, not in rejection, but in gratitude. Smoke spiraled upward, carrying your breath with it. In the dark that followed, you felt the same warmth inside you, not from wax or wick, but from the quiet joy of balance. The wind passed through the hall again, soft and endless. The flame was gone. The light remained. Let the breath widen, gentle, quiet, without effort. Now we cross into the next story, the bridge of mist. This one carries the essence of compassion and connection. How the heart, when open, becomes a bridge between all beings, dissolving the illusion of separation. Story 14, The the bridge of mist. Morning rose from a valley in slow silver layers. Mist hung low between the mountains, drifting through pine trees like a living spirit. The temple bells rang softly in the distance. One tone, two tones, each disappearing into silence. You stood on the wooden bridge that crossed the stream below the temple. The water beneath moved quietly, veiled by fog. You could not see where it began or ended, only the sound of its steady flowing. Master Ryashin joined you, his robe brushing the rail as he leaned beside you. He looked at the mist and said, "This bridge connects two sides of the river, but it does not choose one." You watched the fog drift between the planks and thought you understood. It joins what was separate. He smiled. It reminds us that nothing truly was. For many years, the temple had been a place of quiet retreat, away from villages, away from noise, away from struggle. Yet one day, a traveler arrived at the gate. His clothes were torn, his face pale, his hands shaking with exhaustion. You and another monk helped him inside. He had come from a nearby village struck by illness. "The river has run low," he said weakly. "People are hungry and sick. Please, can the monks help?" Ryashin listened, eyes calm. "We have little," he said, "but what we have is yours." He turned to you. "Prepare food, water, and medicine. And tomorrow, you will go with me to the village." You bowed deeply, though part of you felt unease. You had grown used to stillness, to safety. The outside world felt unpredictable, chaotic. Ryashin noticed. "The mist does not fear the wind," he said gently. "It moves through everything, soft but certain. That is compassion, not pity, not sacrifice, but movement from understanding." The next morning, the two of you walked down the mountain path with baskets of rice and herbs. The air was damp, the fog thick. At times you could see only Ryashin's outline ahead of you. You asked, "Master, what if we cannot help them enough?" He replied, "A single drop of water cannot fill a well, but it can ease a thirst. Compassion is not measured by success, only by sincerity." The path narrowed as you descended. Soon you could hear the faint crying of children and the coughing of the sick. The village appeared through the mist, small, weary, full of smoke from dying fires. The people gathered as you arrived, eyes wide with both hope and shame. Many bowed deeply, some even wept. Ryashin smiled at them as if greeting old friends. "Come," he said softly, "let us eat together first." All day you worked, washing wounds, sharing food, boiling herbs. You felt the fatigue burn in your arms and the ache in your back, but Ryashin never seemed to slow. He moved from person to person, speaking little, yet somehow leaving peace behind him like the scent of incense. At one point, you saw a woman holding her child, too weak to speak. She looked up at you with eyes full of fear. For a moment, you froze. What comfort could words bring here? Then you remember the Master's teaching. Compassion is not what you say. It is what you allow yourself to feel. So you simply sat beside her. You didn't try to fix, to preach, or to console. You placed your hand gently on hers, breathing with her, sharing silence. The child stirred, the woman exhaled, and something subtle shifted, a tiny bridge forming where none had been. When you looked up, Ryashin was watching from afar. He nodded once, his eyes glimmering like dawn through fog. That evening, When the work was done and the fires dimmed, you sat by the river's edge. The villagers had begun to sing softly, not songs of joy, but of endurance. You felt tears rise unexpectedly. They were not from sorrow, but from recognition, the kind that comes when the heart stops dividing itself. Ryashin came to sit beside you. "The bridge has been crossed," he said. You looked at him. "Which bridge?" He smiled. "The one between me and them." He gazed at the river. When we forget compassion, we think we stand apart, watching others suffer. But when compassion returns, we remember that the same river flows through all hearts. There is no other shore. The next morning, you helped the villagers gather wood to rebuild homes destroyed by the storm. Among them was a young boy who had lost his father to the illness. He worked silently beside you, his eyes downcast. You offered him water. He shook his head. "I want to be strong." You said softly, "Even the strongest drink." He looked up at you then, small, tired but alive. He took the cup and drank slowly. When he handed it back, he whispered, "Thank you for crossing the mountain." The words pierced something deep within you. You realized that sometimes compassion doesn't mean grand gestures. It simply means showing up. When you returned to the temple days later, the mist had lifted. The air felt lighter, the bells clearer. Ryashin led you back to the same wooden bridge. The morning sun shimmered on the water below. He said, "This is the 9th gate, the bridge of mist." Compassion connects without claiming. It gives without asking. It heals without needing recognition. He leaned on the rail, watching the reflection of clouds drift across the stream. When your heart becomes this bridge, suffering on one side and peace on the other are no longer two. He turned to you. "Do you understand?" You nodded, tears rising again. To be kind is to remember that we are the same water. He smiled. "Yes, and to forget that is the root of all pain." That night, the temple felt different. The silence wasn't isolation anymore. It was unity. You sat in meditation, feeling the pulse of the world in your chest, not as weight, but as rhythm. You thought of the child, the woman, the song, the mist, the bridge, the river, all one continuous breath. The heart opened wider than before, not from effort, but from recognition. And the morals settled quietly inside you like sunlight dissolving the fog. Compassion is the bridge that dissolves separation. When you walk across it, you realize there was never another side. Outside, the mist thinned completely. The moon reflected on the stream like a path of silver light, unbroken, infinite. You bowed to it, whispering, "May all beings find the same river." And the water, as if hearing you, shimmered in agreement. Let your breath slow. Soften the shoulders, release the effort to do. This story, the empty boat, opens the next gate, ego and harmony. It teaches how peace is restored when we stop taking the waves of life personally. Story 15, The Empty Boat. Morning fog lay thick over the temple's lake, blurring the edges of the reeds and distant pines. The water's surface looked like polished glass, perfectly still. You stood on the dock beside an old wooden boat tied to a post. Master Ryashin stepped beside you, hands folded inside his sleeves. "Today," he said, "we learn from the lake." He untied the rope and pushed the boat gently into the water. "Climb in." You obeyed, the wood cool beneath your feet. Ryashin followed, seating himself at the stern. He picked up an oar and began to row with slow, steady strokes. The boat glided silently through the mist. Each pull of the oar sent ripples outward that quickly disappeared. For a long while, no one spoke. Only the rhythm of wood and water filled the air. Finally, Ryashin said, "Tell me, when someone insults you, what you feel." You frowned. Anger, perhaps, or hurt. He nodded. And when they praise you, you smiled faintly. Pride. You set the oar down and let the boat drift. Both are disturbances on the same lake. You tilted your head. Then should we feel nothing? Ryashin smiled. No, feel everything, but do not name the ripples as storms. A soft current carried you toward the center of the lake. The fog thickened until shore disappeared entirely. It felt as if the world had vanished, leaving only water and breath. Ryashin reached for a small paddle lying beside him and gave it to you. "Row," he said. You began to paddle, awkward at first, then smoother. The boat moved forward easily, slicing through the mist. After a while, something bumped the side, a dull thud. You froze. Through the fog, another boat appeared, drifting aimlessly toward you. It hit your boat again, harder this time, spinning it slightly. Annoyed, you muttered, "Who's steering that?" Ryashin's voice was calm. "Go look." You leaned over. The other boat was empty. Ryashin smiled. "So, will you still be angry?" You felt foolish, laughing softly. "No, master. There's no one to blame." He nodded. "Exactly. Most of our suffering is like this. We are struck by empty boats, careless words, passing judgments, imagined insults, and we shout at ghosts." He dipped his fingers into the water. If you can remember that every boat is empty, your heart will never be disturbed. The two boats drifted side by side for a while, moving wherever the current wished. Ryashin closed his eyes, breathing deeply. "Harmony," he said, "is not the absence of contact. It is the understanding that nothing touches you unless you decide it does." You looked around at the fog, limitless, soft, embracing everything without resistance. He continued, "When ego commands, every bump feels like an attack. When awareness steers, every bump feels like movement." You watched the ripples blend together until it was impossible to tell which boat had caused them. After some time, the sun began to pierce through the mist. You could see faint outlines of trees returning to view. Ryashin took the oar again and began rowing back toward shore. "This story," he said, "is from the old masters. A man once crossed a river and was struck by another boat. In anger, he shouted until he saw it was empty. The next day, he met another boat, again struck and again empty. Eventually, he stopped shouting altogether. He looked at you. When you see through ego, every boat becomes empty. Back at the dock, you stepped out and helped Ryashin tie the boat. The air was brighter now. The lake shimmered with sunlight. He said, "This is the 10th gate, harmony through emptiness. The ego believes it owns the lake, the boat, even the wind. Awareness owns nothing, and so it cannot be injured." You bowed. "But Master, how do I live without ego in a world full of people who still have one?" He smiled. "You don't remove it, you see through it. The ego is like the boat, useful for crossing, but foolish to carry once you reach the shore." He tapped your chest lightly. "Use it, but don't live in it. Later, While sweeping the courtyard, a young monk accidentally bumped into you, spilling a bucket of water over your feet. He gasped, "I'm so sorry." You looked down, water dripping from your robe, and almost reacted, almost. Then you remembered the lake. You smiled. The boat is empty. The novice blinked, confused, then laughed nervously. You both laughed together, and the moment passed like ripples fading into still water. That night, the lake reflected a full moon. You walked back to the dock alone. The air smelled of cedar and cool stone. The water was perfectly calm, the boats tied side by side, silent. You looked at them and thought of all the times you had taken life's bumps personally, the small slights, the disappointments, the desires unmet. Each one had felt like an assault until you realized the truth. Most of them came from empty boats drifting on their own currents. You whispered to the water, "I will stop shouting." The lake shimmered, a soft nod in return. In meditation later that night, you saw your own thoughts drift through the mind like boats, some bright, some dark, all empty. None stayed long enough to possess. You let them pass, touching nothing, resisting nothing. And in that silence, something vast opened, a peace beyond reason, a spaciousness that made every thought seem like a small ripple on an infinite sea. Ryashin's words returned like a whisper carried by wind. The wise man sees the same river flowing through all boats. The foolish one shouts at the water. You smiled, eyes still closed. When dawn came, the lake was again shrouded in mist. You walked to the dock one last time. The boats rocked gently against the posts, each filled only with the silence of morning. You bowed to them, gratitude blooming quietly in your chest. The moral rose within you like the sun behind the fog. When you let go of ownership, nothing can strike you. When you see every boat as empty, harmony fills the lake. The mist thickened again, soft and luminous. The sound of the water merged with your heartbeat until they were one rhythm. You turned to leave, feeling lighter than ever before. Behind you, the lake lay still, holding everything, claiming nothing. Take a long, deep breath. Feel it move through your ribs, steady and alive. This story, The Sparrow and the Storm, opens the next gate, courage and resilience. It shows that strength is not loud defiance, but quiet faith that even in chaos, the heart can still fly. Story 16, The Sparrow and the Storm. The air that morning was heavy, thick with the scent of rain. Clouds gathered over the temple in gray folds, their edges pulsing with distant lightning. The monks moved quickly, tying shutters, covering the lanterns, preparing for what the sky was bringing. You stood by the gate, watching the dark horizon swallow the mountains. A low rumble echoed, deep, endless, ancient. Ryashin joined you, calm as ever. His robe flapped lightly in the wind. Storms, he said, are the world's way of teaching us how to bow. You frowned. Bow, master. He smiled faintly. Yes, the bamboo survives not because it resists, but because it bends. So too with us. The first drops fell, large, heavy, cold. Within moments, the rain came in sheets. The courtyard flooded. The wind howled through the eaves. Thunder shook the beams of the meditation hall. The world seemed to roar. And then, in the midst of it, you saw something small, a brown sparrow soaked and trembling, clinging to the edge of the roof beam. The wind buffeted it again and again, but it did not flee. It stayed. "Master," you said, pointing, "the sparrow will fall." Ryashin looked and nodded. "Watch." For a long minute, you both stood in silence. Rain pounded the tiles. Lightning tore the sky, yet the sparrow remained. It crouched low, wings folded tight, eyes closed, breathing through the storm. When the thunder rolled again, it opened its wings briefly, shook the water from its feathers, and stayed. Ryashin whispered, "This is courage, not the absence of fear, but the decision to stay awake in the wind." You felt something shift inside you. The sparrow wasn't fighting the storm. It wasn't even trying to be brave. It simply trusted the moment, its perch, its strength, its place in the world. That trust made it unbreakable. Hours passed. The storm raged on, pulling branches from trees, sending waves across the flooded courtyard. Inside, the monks sat in silence, listening to the rain hammer against the roof. You couldn't stop thinking of the sparrow. When night fell, the storm began to ease. The wind softened, the thunder moved farther away, and the rain slowed to a steady whisper. You stepped outside with a lantern, scanning the roof beam. The sparrow was gone. You feared the worst, until you saw a small shape fluttering near the plum tree. It landed, shook itself, and began to chirp softly, a delicate sound cutting through the night's damp stillness. You smiled, relief flooding through you. Ryashin appeared beside you. "Did you see?" he asked. "Yes," you said. "It survived." He nodded. "Because it didn't fight the sky." The next morning, sunlight broke through scattered clouds. The temple courtyard glittered with water droplets. The monks swept away fallen branches, laughing softly at their muddy sandals. You noticed the sparrow again, this time perched on the same roof beam, singing as if nothing had happened. Ryashin said, "This is the 11th gate, resilience without resistance." He gestured to the sparrow. "Life will shake you, but if you meet each wave with stillness instead of panic, you'll find you were never in danger, only in movement." He picked up a fallen leaf, torn but still green. The storm doesn't destroy. It reveals what bends and what breaks. He placed the leaf on the surface of a puddle. It floated peacefully. See? It knows how to rest on the water instead of drowning in it. Later that day, you walked down to the river's edge. The current was swollen, brown with silt, rushing faster than usual. You found a broken piece of wood drifting downstream, scarred, yet still moving, carried easily by the water. You thought of all the times you had resisted life's flow, trying to hold on to certainty, to safety. Each time you clung, pain followed. You whispered, "Maybe the storm never wanted to harm me, only to teach me how to float." You picked up a small stick and placed it in the current, watching it twist and turn until it vanished downstream. For the first time, you felt no fear of what came next. That evening, Ryashin told the monks an old parable. He said, "A man once prayed to the heavens for calm seas, for peace, for a life without storms. The heavens answered, 'We will not take away the wind. We will teach you to sail.'" He looked around the hall. The awakened do not ask the sky to be still. They learn to find stillness within the storm. He paused, and when they do, the storm becomes a song. You listened, every word landing like rain on dry earth. After the lecture, you stepped outside again. The night was clear now, stars burning bright above the wet stones. You sat on the veranda, hearing distant frogs and the low hum of flowing water. You thought of the sparrow, the bamboo, the leaf, the broken boat, all part of the same teaching. Strength was never about control. It was about trust, the kind that knows, even if I fall, I will still land within life. You close your eyes and breathe deeply. The air smelled of renewal, of earth and rain and rebirth. And the moral arose within, quiet and complete. Courage is not defiance. It is the calm acceptance that the wind cannot harm the sky. Resilience is not endurance. It is remembering that even the storm belongs to you. In the distance, the sparrow sang once more, not loudly, but with the simple, perfect joy of having endured. You smiled. Ryashin's words echoed again. The bamboo bends. The sparrow stays. And you whispered into the cool air, so will I. Let your breath deepen again, smooth and steady, like waves retreating into sand. This story, the footprints in the sand, opens the next gate, detachment from the past and inner freedom. It teaches that peace does not come from erasing what was, but from walking forward without carrying its weight. Story 17. The Footprints in the Sand. Evening light stretched long across the beach below the temple cliffs. The tide was low, and the air smelled faintly of salt and sun-warmed stone. You walked alongside Master Ryashin, your sandals leaving prints in the wet sand. The sea shimmered quietly, its rhythm slow and eternal. For a while, neither of you spoke. Only the sound of waves folding onto the shore filled the silence. Finally, Ryashin said, "Every step leaves a mark, but none remain for long." You looked down at the trail of your footprints, clear and deep. "Until the tide comes," you said. He smiled. "Yes, the tide always comes." He stopped, gazing toward the horizon. "The past is like these footprints. It proves you have walked, but it cannot walk for you." Later, as you sat on a smooth rock near the edge of the water, Ryashin began to draw circles in the sand with a small stick. "Tell me," he said, "when you remember your past, what do you feel?" You thought for a moment. Sometimes regret, sometimes longing, sometimes pride. He nodded. "And do any of those feelings change what happened?" You shook your head. He drew another circle. "The past is a teacher, not a home. Stay too long, and it becomes a prison." He smoothed the sand with his hand until the circle disappeared. When you let the sea take your footprints, you do not lose the journey. You free your feet. That night, as you lay in your sleeping mat, you couldn't sleep. Memories rose uninvited, mistakes made, words left unsaid, faces you hadn't seen in years. They came like ghosts, soft but insistent. You sat up, breathing deeply. You thought of Ryashin's circles, the waves, the footprints. How do I let them go? You wondered. You got up quietly and walked outside. The moon shone over the sea, silver and vast. The tide was rising now, washing away the beach you'd walked that afternoon. You stood at the edge of the surf and whispered, "Take them." The water rushed around your ankles, cool and endless. You felt the pull, the rhythm, the sea swallowing everything gently, without judgment. And for the first time, you didn't feel loss. You felt cleansing. The next morning, Ryashin found you still on shore. He said nothing, only sat beside you. After a long silence, he asked, "Did the sea answer you?" You nodded. "It took everything." He smiled faintly. "The sea takes nothing. It simply returns things to where they belong." He picked up a handful of sand and let it fall through his fingers. "The past clings only when you close your hand." He opened his palm, empty, shining in the morning sun. "See, freedom is not forgetting. It's not needing to remember all the time." That day, a young monk approached Ryashin with tears in his eyes. He had broken a sacred vase while cleaning the altar. "I have failed the temple," he said. Ryashin asked calmly, "Did you break it on purpose?" The monk shook his head. "Then you did not fail," said the master. "You learned the law of impermanence." He gathered the fragments into a small basket. "Every mistake is a footprint too," he said. "But if you stare at it, you will forget to walk." The monk bowed, his sobs quieting. Ryashin turned to you and said, "When you hold guilt too long, it becomes self-attachment, another form of pride." You frowned. "Pride?" He nodded. "Yes. To believe your error is too great to be forgiven is to think yourself larger than the law of change." You let his words sink in. That evening, you walked the shore again. The wind had picked up, brushing through your robe, whispering through the reeds. You saw new footprints, perhaps from travelers who had passed earlier, and watched as the tide slowly crept forward to erase them. You realized that the sea didn't choose which footprints to take. It washed over all, good, bad, big, small, equally. And that was mercy. You whispered to the horizon, "If the sea can forgive the shore each night, I can forgive myself." The wind carried your words away like incense smoke. Later, in meditation, Ryashin spoke to the monks. The self clings to memory because it fears vanishing. But memory is not identity. It is evidence of experience. When you stop calling it mine, it becomes wisdom. He looked around the hall. Imagine your life as sand. The wind will shape it. The waves will smooth it. You cannot command either. You can only keep walking. He paused, then added, "The awakened do not erase their past. They let it dissolve naturally, knowing that truth remains even after memory fades." When the hall grew quiet again, you opened your eyes. In the dim light of the candles, the faces around you seemed softer, less burdened, less defined by what had been. You realized how much of your identity had been built on stories you no longer needed. You weren't the person who made that mistake years ago, nor the one who triumphed once long ago. You were simply this breath now, and the weight of your past, so long carried like a pack on your shoulders, began to slide away, not with struggle, but with quiet relief. The next morning, the tide was low again. The sand lay smooth and unmarked. You walked barefoot across it, each step new, each footprint temporary. Behind you, the wind began to erase them as you went, and the moral unfolded in you like sunlight across calm water. You are not the footprints you've left, but the movement that keeps walking. Freedom begins when you stop arguing with the tide. You stood at the edge of the water again, bowing to the horizon. The sky and sea met in perfect stillness, without line, without boundary. You whispered, "Thank you for erasing me." But the wind answered softly, "You were never erased, only returned." Breathe in slowly. Let your chest rise and fall like a wave on calm water. This story, the monk and the mirror lake, opens the next gate, self-acceptance and true reflection. It teaches that peace appears not by improving the self, but by seeing it clearly and embracing all that it already is. Story 18. The Monk and the Mirror Lake. The mountains behind the temple held a small, hidden lake. It lay in a bowl of stone and pine, untouched by the noise of the world. At dawn, it became a perfect mirror: sky, clouds, birds, and trees appearing upside down on its still surface. One morning, Ryashin led you there before the sun had fully risen. Mist hovered above the water, glowing faintly in the blue light. He said, "This lake reflects everything that stands before it, yet it keeps nothing." You nodded, watching your own reflection tremble slightly in the water. Ryashin asked, "When you look at yourself here, what do you see?" You hesitated. "I see someone trying to be better." He smiled. "And who taught you that you were not already enough?" You had no answer. He dipped his finger into the lake, rippling both reflections. Every drop of water accepts the sky without question. It doesn't say, "I must become clear before I reflect." It simply allows clarity to return. For years, you had carried quiet dissatisfaction. The thought that enlightenment meant perfection, that stillness meant never faltering, that a monk should be beyond human emotion. But here, by this lake, those ideas began to dissolve. Ryashin sat on a rock near the shore. "Self-acceptance is not pride," he said. "It is honesty. The flower does not compare its color to another's. It blooms according to its nature." He picked up a small stone and tossed it into the water. Rings spread outward, distorting your face's reflection. "You see, the ripples come and go, but the lake is still a lake." He looked at you. So too with you. That afternoon, you stayed by the lake after the master left. The air had warmed, cicadas humming softly among the trees. You knelt at the edge of the water and peered in. The ripples had vanished. Your reflection returned, calm, whole, imperfect. You noticed lines under your eyes, the curve of your mouth, the faint scar on your chin. For the first time, you didn't judge them. They were evidence of living, of learning. A dragonfly landed briefly on your shoulder. Its wings shimmered, then lifted away. You smiled. For years you had sought to erase flaws. Now you saw they were part of the same painting. You whispered, "This face too is Buddha." The wind stirred the trees as if agreeing. That evening, back at the temple, a novice came to you distressed. He had lost his temper earlier, shouting at another monk during chores. "I am unworthy of this path," he said, trembling. You took him to the mirror lake the next morning. The surface was still again, the world doubled in its glass. "Look," you said. He knelt and stared at his reflection. "I see myself," he whispered, "but I don't like what I see." You smiled gently, then looked longer. He frowned. "It doesn't change." "Exactly," you said. "The lake doesn't reject its ripples. It lets them settle. So should you." He watched until his breathing slowed, until the trembling stopped. The reflection grew clear once more. He turned to you. "Is that what peace is, to forgive ourselves?" You nodded. "To see yourself as you are without flinching, that is forgiveness. To love what you see, that is awakening." Later, during the midday tea, Ryashin said to the monks, "People polish mirrors trying to see themselves clearly, forgetting that the reflection is never separate from the seer. When you understand this, you stop chasing improvement and begin to rest in awareness itself. He poured tea slowly into each cup, steam rising between words. You don't need to become better. You only need to stop believing you are worse. He looked at you knowingly. How was the lake this morning? You bowed. It taught the lesson perfectly. He smiled, as it always does. That night, you return alone. The moon hung above the trees, bright and full. Its reflection floated on the water, round, pure, motionless. You whispered, "Do you ever doubt your light?" The moon, of course, did not answer. Yet you knew the truth. It didn't need to. It simply shone. You felt tears rise, not from sadness, but from release, the slow letting go of every imagined flaw. You had spent years trying to reach perfection, never realizing you had been standing on the shore of perfection all along. You remembered Ryashin's words. The awakened one doesn't destroy the self. He sees through its walls until only sky remains. You looked down again at your reflection. It was no longer just your face you saw, but the moon, the trees, the stars, all joined in one seamless image. There is no separation left between you and what you observed, only presence. And the moral rose like light breaking across the lake. Acceptance is not surrender. It is seeing clearly that you are never incomplete. When you stop fighting your reflection, the water becomes sky. You bowed to the lake. The moon bowed back. Then, with quiet joy, you turned toward the temple, carrying the stillness of that reflection within you, a mirror that could never again be broken. Let the breath settle again, soft like autumn air. This next story, The Falling Leaf, opens the gate of impermanence and grace and change. It teaches that all endings are movements in the same eternal dance. And when you see their rhythm, you stop fearing the fall. Story 19, The Falling Leaf. The first chill of autumn arrived quietly. The mountain air carried a faint scent of cedar and smoke from the monks' evening fires. In the temple garden, the maples had begun to turn green to gold, gold to red, red to something that wasn't quite color anymore, but memory. You swept the courtyard that morning, the broom brushing softly across fallen leaves. Each stroke was like a breath, present, complete, vanishing. Ryashin came to stand beside you. He watched a leaf twist slowly through the air before landing on the stones. He said, "Watch how it falls." You paused, eyes following another leaf drifting down, spinning weightless, neither resisting nor rushing. Ryashin smiled. It has spent its whole life feeding the tree, breathing light, dancing with wind. Now it falls without regret. That is enlightenment. Later that day, you walked the temple path beneath the maples. The ground was already covered in a soft quilt of colors. Each step made a gentle sound, like paper sighing. You felt a faint sadness watching the leaves fall one by one. The beauty felt too brief. Ryashin sensed your thought. You mourn the loss because you still believe beauty must last to be real, he said. You looked at him. Doesn't it? He shook his head. A note of music is beautiful because it ends. The leaf falls because it must make room for new life. Nothing dies, it only transforms. He crouched and picked up one red leaf, its edges curling slightly. This leaf is the same as you. It has come from the tree, and soon it will return to it through the soil. Change is not the opposite of life, it is life. He let the leaf go. The wind carried it away. That night, Wind swept across the valley. Leaves rustled like whispers in the dark. You lay awake listening to them, thinking of everything that had changed in your own life. People gone, moments ended, dreams shifted. Each memory felt like a leaf falling into time. You got up, went outside, and stood beneath the largest maple. The moonlight shimmered through its thinning branches. You reached out and caught a leaf as it fell. Its surface was cool and dry, veins like tiny rivers etched through its body. You whispered, "You are beautiful," because you are leaving. Something inside you softened, an ache turned to peace. The next morning, you joined Ryashin in the garden again. Most of the trees were bare now. The ground was thick with fallen leaves. Ryashin handed you a rake. "We will gather them, not to discard, but to honor." Together you moved slowly, piling leaves into small mounds. The smell of earth and time rose around you. He said, "Each leaf is a memory fulfilled." The mistake of man is to cling to the branch when the season has already changed. You asked quietly, "And when something we love falls away, how do we let it go?" He looked up at the nearly empty branches. By remembering that love itself does not end, only its form changes. He brushed his hand through the pile of leaves, scattering a few back into the air. The wind takes them where they must go. That is compassion, allowing what you love to move freely. At noon, the younger monks carried the leaf piles to the edge of the garden to burn them. The flames rose golden, flickering softly. You watched smoke drift upward, carrying the scent of autumn sky. Ryashin stood beside you. "See how even fire participates in renewal," he said. "It does not destroy the leaf. It releases what was trapped within it." You watched the smoke rise higher, blending with clouds. "So nothing ever truly leaves?" He smiled. "No, it only changes its name." That evening, as dusk settled, the temple bell sounded low, deep, infinite. You walked again beneath the maples, now nearly bare. The world felt quieter, wider. You realized that impermanence was not loss. It was music. Each falling leaf, each ending moment was part of a larger harmony too vast for sorrow. You whispered to the wind, "Thank you for teaching me how to fall." And the wind answered through the rustling of the last few leaves. You are already falling, always, into the next breath, the next dawn, the next becoming. That night, during meditation, Ryashin said, "The awakened do not seek eternity. They seek harmony with change. The fool clings to form and calls it safety. The wise dissolve into the rhythm and call it freedom." You breathe deeply, the scent of smoke still faint in your robes. You felt yourself letting go, not of life, but of the demand that it remain still. You understood that to live fully was to die continually into each passing moment, reborn with every breath. When morning came again, the garden was quiet. A single leaf clung stubbornly to a high branch, trembling in the wind. You watched it for a long while, knowing it too would fall soon. But instead of sadness, you felt tenderness, like watching a friend depart for a journey you no longer feared. And the morals settled inside you like sunlight on winter soil. To love impermanence is to stop resisting grace. When you allow yourself to fall, you discover you were never separate from the wind. A breeze stirred, lifting the last leaf into the air. You followed it with your eyes until it vanished into sky. And in that instant, the entire world exhaled. Breathe in slowly. Let it leave gently, like a bell tone fading through the air. This story, The Silent Bell, brings the final teaching of this circle of stories, awakening and inner peace. It is about the moment when all searching ceases, when even sound is heard as silence. Story 20, The Silent Bell. Winter had arrived in the valley. The temple roofs glistened with frost, and the sound of footsteps on the wooden floors echoed clear and sharp. The air smelled of cedar smoke and snow. In the center courtyard stood the old bronze bell, taller than a man, dark with age, its surface etched with faint lines from centuries of use. Each morning before dawn, a monk would strike it once. Its voice would roll through the mountains, calling all beings, near and far, to awaken. But this morning, the bell remained silent. You found Master Ryashin standing before it, his hands resting on the wooden striker. He seemed lost in thought, gazing at the cold metal. You bowed. "Shall I sound the bell, Master?" He smiled faintly. "No, not today." You hesitated, but the morning will not begin without it. Ryashin turned toward you. "The morning has already begun. We only imagine it starts with sound." The two of you stood in stillness. The air was so cold it seemed to hum. Somewhere in the distance, a crow called once and then was silent again. Ryashin asked, "When the bell is struck, what do you hear?" You answered automatically, "The sound, Master." He shook his head gently. "You hear the silence that follows. That is what enters the heart." He tapped the bell lightly with his knuckles. The metal vibrated faintly, producing no real tone, only a soft trembling you felt more than heard. "The purpose of sound," he said, "is to reveal silence." Later that morning, you walked with him to the meditation hall. Frost melted from the eaves, dripping into small pools that shimmered like mirrors. Inside, the monks were already seated, eyes closed, breath slow. The absence of the bell had unsettled them slightly, a break in the rhythm they'd known every morning for years. Ryashin took his seat at the front. He said nothing for a long while. Then, in a whisper barely above the wind, he said, "Listen." The hall was still. A few birds sang outside, the crackle of wood in the hearth, the quiet shifting of robes. "Do you hear it?" he asked softly. "The bell is not rung, yet everything answers it." You felt your heart slow. You realized that sound was everywhere, but none of it demanded attention. It was simply part of the vast silence holding all. That afternoon, you asked him as you poured tea, "Why did you not strike the bell?" He smiled, "Because it no longer needs to speak. The monks are ready to hear the silence directly." He lifted his cup. Steam rose in a slow spiral. "In the beginning, we need form, ritual, sound, practice. They are gates that open into stillness. But one day, the gate dissolves." You nodded, and then he sipped his tea. Then you realized there was never a gate, only sky. He looked out toward the mountains. "This is the final gate, awakening without sound." That night, snow began to fall, quiet, endless, soft. You stood again before the great bell. The snowflakes melted as they touched its cold surface. You placed your hand on the metal and felt its weight, its age, its silence. You thought of all the mornings it had rung, thousands of strikes, thousands of echoes fading into dawn. And yet here it stood, whole, content, saying nothing. You realized that silence was not the absence of sound. It was the presence of everything perfectly still. You closed your eyes and breathed. Somewhere deep within, it felt as if the bell was ringing again, not through the ears, but through the heart. The next morning, the monks gathered once more. No one touched the bell. No one needed to. The air itself seemed to hum with invisible resonance. Ryashin began walking slowly through the courtyard, snow crunching beneath his feet. He said, "When the bell stops ringing, you finally hear the truth that awakening was never in the strike, but in the listening." He turned to you. Sound awakens the mind. Silence awakens the soul. Then he smiled. But they are not two. You spent the rest of that day in deep stillness. Every sound, the rustle of wind through bamboo, the creak of wood, the call of birds, all felt like extensions of one endless tone. Even your heartbeat joined the rhythm. You thought, perhaps I have always been the bell, and life the striker. Each joy, each sorrow, each breath had been an impact that sent waves of awareness through the vast silence you truly were. And each time, after the echo faded, peace remained. That evening, Ryashin lit the lamps in the meditation hall. The flame wavered, then steadied. The awakened one no longer rings bells, he said quietly. He becomes the sound itself. He looked at you. You have heard many teachings, clouds, rivers, mirrors, bridges, storms. But this final one is not a teaching. It is a return. He paused, the light catching his eyes. When you no longer chase enlightenment, you find it sitting beside you in silence. He placed a single finger over his lips, the final gesture of a master to his student. You bowed deeply, the hall filled with the sound of nothing, the sound that holds all worlds. And in that silence, you felt everything: the bell, the snow, the sea, the sparrow, the falling leaf, even your own breath, all ringing together in perfect harmony. The search ended there. The moral rose softly inside you, wordless but clear. Peace is not found when the bell is struck, but when you realize it has never stopped ringing. Silence is not emptiness. It is the heart of all sound. Outside, the snow kept falling, light upon light, silence upon silence. The bell stood untouched, gleaming faintly in the moonlight. You watched, smiling, as one snowflake landed on its rim. For a moment, the entire world seemed to pause, listening. And in that pause, you heard it, the sound of the silent bell. Breathe slowly and feel how the breath itself completes a circle, beginning, ending, beginning again. This is the conclusion, silent mindfulness, letting awareness flow. It gathers all 20 stories into one calm reflection. There is no new teaching here, only remembering. The seasons had turned their full wheel. The snows melted, the streams swelled, and the air grew gentle once more. You sat beneath the same old maple where your journey had begun, the mountains now free of mist. The temple was quiet. Only the wind moved, playing through bamboo like a slow breath. You could hear faint echoes, a child laughing far below in the valley, the rhythmic clack of a wooden bell marking afternoon prayers, the distant call of crane. Master Ryashin joined you, walking with that same unhurried step. He lowered himself to the ground beside you. He said, "All that begins returns, as water returns to the sea. So too does understanding. You bowed. "Have I finished the path, master?" He smiled gently. "The path is not a line you walk. It is a river you remember." The years of teaching drifted through your mind like clouds. The body's stillness in the first meditation by the pond. The letting go of control, learned for the clouds that dissolved into sky. The compassion you found in the bridge of mist. The humility of the pebble that belonged to the ocean. The faith of the fisherman's lantern drifting into night. The forgiveness learned from the broken cup. The resilience of the sparrow that stayed through the storm. The impermanence of the falling leaf. The mirror lake that showed you your true face. And finally, the silent bell, whose voice could be heard only when the heart grew still enough to listen. Each story had become less a lesson and more a reflection of something that was always there. The awareness watching quietly through every moment. Ryashin said, "When we began, you wanted to understand mindfulness. Tell me now, what is it?" You closed your eyes. The answer came not as thought, but as feeling, the way wind moves through trees without needing to speak. Mindfulness, you said slowly, is hearing the bell even when it hasn't been struck. It is walking without leaving footprints, loving without holding, breathing without owning the breath. The master nodded. Yes, awareness flowing freely. That is the nature of awakening. He picked up a fallen twig and drew a circle in the sand. Every story, every moment returns to this, the circle of being. You cannot step outside it, for you are the circle itself. The wind erased the drawing almost instantly. He smiled. Even the teaching must vanish, or it becomes another chain. You both sat in silence for a long while. The world around you felt perfectly balanced. The air neither cold nor warm, the light neither bright nor dim. After a time, Ryashin spoke again. In our lives, we chase three illusions: permanence, control, and separation. The practice of silent mindfulness removes them one by one. When permanence falls, we see beauty in change. When control falls, we discover trust. When separation falls, we awaken compassion. And what remains when all three are gone, he said softly, is peace. You asked, and when peace is found, what do we do with it? Ryashin laughed quietly. Nothing. Peace that needs to be used is not peace. Simply live and let awareness flow where it will. He looked toward the valley. When you eat, eat fully. When you walk, walk gently. When you speak, speak truthfully. When you are silent, be completely silent. Each act done with full awareness is enlightenment in motion. He paused, his gaze softening. And when you forget, begin again. The river always forgives. As the sun lowered toward the horizon, you walked together through the garden. The plum blossoms had begun to open again. Bees hummed lazily between them. Ryashin stopped near the pond. The water reflected the pink of the sky. He said, "Do you remember when you first came here? How restless your mind was?" You smiled. "I tried to force the pond to be still." He nodded. "Now you know it was never the pond that needed calming." You both laughed softly. A young monk approached, bowing deeply. "Master, it is time for the evening bell." Ryashin looked at you. "Would you do the honor?" You hesitated, then took the wooden striker. The bronze felt cool beneath your hand. You raised the striker and paused, not out of doubt, but reverence. You had heard this bell many times before, but now its silence already felt full. You struck it once. The sound rolled through the valley, deep and pure. Birds rose from the trees. The air vibrated with golden resonance. Then the sound faded, leaving only stillness, vast, alive, infinite. Ryashin closed his eyes. "That is awareness," he whispered. "Not the ringing, not the fading, the listening." When night came, you sat alone on the veranda. The stars shimmered above, reflected in the still pond below. You thought of everything you had learned, and it felt like nothing at all. Not emptiness, but wholeness too large for words. You realized there was no separation between teacher and student, sound and silence, sea and sky, you and the breath that moved through everything. You whispered to the stars, "There is no end, is there?" The night answered, silent and endless. You smiled, then let it flow, and as you close your eyes, this final meditation unfolded within you, not in words, but in rhythm. A closing meditation. Breathe in. Feel the cool air entering the body, a gift to the world. Breathe out. Feel it return, the world breathing through you. Let awareness sink from the head to the heart, from the heart to the belly, from the belly to the earth. You're not the thoughts drifting by. They are clouds. You're not the body resting here. It is the mountain. You are not even a breath. You are the space that receives it. Listen. In every sound there is stillness. In every stillness there is sound. Both rise from the same source, the silent bell within. When you walk again, walk like water, gentle, patient, reflecting the sky. When you speak, let your words be like falling leaves, light, necessary, and ready to let go. When you love, love like the sun, shining without reason, asking nothing in return. And when you forget, when fear or noise returns, remember the fisherman's lantern, the sparrow's courage, the broken cup, the bridge of mist, the cloud that forgot its shape, and the bell that spoke without sound. They're all the same teaching. Let awareness flow. The night deepened. The last light of the temple lamps flickered out one by one. Only the stars remained and the soft sound of your breath. Nothing more was needed. Everything was complete. Moral of the whole work. Silent mindfulness is not escape from life. It is merging with it so deeply that no separation remains. When awareness flows freely, peace is not something you seek. It is what you already are. The bell did not ring again that night, yet its echo seemed to live in every part of the world, in wind, in waves, in the slow pulse of your heart. And so the circle closed, perfectly silent.